The first part will be a presentation from Teamworks, which we'll discuss later in the meeting, and then we are going to work together to develop a response to our authorizers of our notice of concern. So I will give it to Christine.
Oh, wow, okay. I'm Christine Robleski with Teamworks. I'm a senior consultant. I'm actually now next to Dennis Cheesebrough, who is the founder of Teamworks, the longest serving consultant at Teamworks International. Prior to being at Teamworks, I worked in and out of St. Paul Public Schools, but I also did independent consulting. And so I did work with early childhood when I was an independent consultant. I did work with the Hmong Charter School, did a lot of crisis communications and support and marketing support back then. And now have been working with Teamworks for a little over 10 years. And a lot of the work that we do at Teamworks has to do with strategic planning, working with organizations that really support education and education-focused organizations. So can I run this movie?
You're on the next slide.
So I'll just go through the short slide deck that we have. And if we have time, given your busy schedule, we can work through some questions. Wendell and Randy reached out to us and asked if we might be willing to provide some professional development to your school board on excellence in governance. It's one of the 3 areas in our education leadership system. And so we met, we discussed what some of the objectives were, and it's really about providing and strengthening the board's understanding of governance. And I understand that your authorizer also would like for you to really strengthen your governance professional development as well. So we discussed embarking on this year of excellence in governance, really focusing on your role as a charter school board, providing that partnership leadership support, and we discussed doing it roughly monthly beginning in October. And then providing strategic coaching or support as needed, because as we do this kind of work, we generally find that there might be something else that you want to focus on, or maybe one of you wants a little bit more support or coaching in your role. And we've provided for that as well in the proposal. So on the next slide, you'll see, and I believe you have a copy of the proposal, which you'll be talking about later on, is our process approach. Again, very simple. 5 2-hour sessions, 1 3-hour session, have a hold October 14th. If you choose to move forward with this proposal. And it's really around that school board development. And after talking with Randy and Wendell, once they have a chance to talk with you, we'll prioritize what those governance sessions can be focused on. But again, we'll start with a 3-hour session, kind of providing the overview of our education leadership system, but have it be interactive. And then 2-hour sessions after that, again, prioritizing what it is you want to focus on here in your governance needs. And then that strategic and situational coaching as needed. So just under $15,000 for the kind of support that we would be providing to you. And on the next slide, you'll see our adapted education leadership system specifically focused on charter schools. So in the center, and we will go over this more in October when we come together, is what we call the desired daily experience. That is that desired experience between students, staff, and families on a day in, day out basis. When we've been working with schools and districts in developing strategic plans, that's one of the first steps, is talking to parents, talking to staff members, talking to students about how they would describe their desired daily experience. And then we build the plan and even the progress monitoring vision cards around that desired daily experience. So what you see surrounding that are generally the adults in the system at the school and how they support that desired daily experience on a regular basis based on the roles of governance, management, and consultation. And you'll see on the left-hand side there, you have you as a school board, but you also have your authorizer, and we consider both of those as part of the governance role for charter schools. And then you, of course, have, in this case, you have a director. Not all of the charter schools we work with have an executive director or a designated director, but most of them do. So you have your management team, you have your teachers and staff and your parents and your other partners that are part of that consultation role. Of course, again, given that you're a charter school board, you have teachers that have to straddle two roles, the governance role and then the teaching role. And so it's really imperative that when you're here at this table, you're really focusing on that school board role. When you're in front of the students and talking to parents, say at conferences, you're really focusing on that teacher role. So that's part of what we'll explore when we do the development with you, which is what do you need in order to be able to differentiate between that? And then even what's more difficult is helping your community differentiate as well. If they're contacting you in your school board capacity, how does that differ and feel to you from them contacting you in, say, a teacher or parent or community member capacity? So, and we do that with other school districts as well, about what does it mean when you are trying to have both of those roles, fulfill them, meet the needs of your own students or the students in your school, and also really be clean about those lines. So that's it in a nutshell, and that's what we would focus on, again, in the orientation session. And then as we continue to move forward with you, we talk about what are some of the other practices that will help you be in excellence in governance. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see these are just examples of some of the professional development sessions that we do with boards. The orientation session, and then as I mentioned, some of the practices and tools. We have what we call frameworks at TeamWorks, and they're really about helping adults work in partnership together in order to achieve your desired outcomes. Sometimes it's around decision making, and so we'll go through the decision making framework with you and a guiding change document that allows you as the leadership of the school to set parameters around a change process, then hand that off to a team that would design the recommendations before it comes back to you for a decision. So those are just a couple of examples. We'll talk about what stakeholder engagement and consultation means here at MSA and how that might differ from another organization. And one of the things that we strongly recommend is that you have a 3-year governance plan that aligns with the school's own strategic plan. So when we do strategic planning with schools and districts, we strongly suggest and we work with you to develop what we call an operational plan for the management side. So how are you going to implement and stage the work over 3 years instead of trying to just have 1 year improvements at a time? And so we also suggest then that the school board have a 3-year plan. You generally work in 1 year increments, but as you look over the course of the school's 3-year period, are you going to need to add on to the building? Are you going to need to rethink your authorizer relationship? Are you going to need to go out for a grant and explore some new opportunities for you that you know you're not going to be able to do in the next year, but maybe that's 2.5, 3 years out. So we would strongly suggest that you develop that. If you don't have one, we could certainly work on that with you as well. And if we go to the next slide, just tell you a little bit about us. We have been in business for almost 30 years now, and our work has adjusted as, our work has adjusted as the work of schools and districts have adjusted. During COVID, as you might imagine, we had to zig and zag, much like schools and districts had to, and we refined our approach. We keep adjusting based on the consultants that join us, the work of our clients. We consider ourselves pollinators. So what we learned from other schools and districts, we bring to new schools and districts. And we're actually starting to talk about how can we network our clients a little bit more so that you can all learn from each other. So it's really around trying to be respectful of you as a client. We want to take our time with you. We consider ourselves co-learners with you. While we have our guidelines and standards and frameworks, we consider ourselves flexible, and we really try to adapt to what your specific needs are. And then the next slide, a little bit more about us. So that education leadership system that I mentioned, we have a version for school districts, and we have a version for charter schools, and we would focus on the charter school version with you. We even adapt it when we're working with small nonprofits as well, because all of them are education focused. And so again, we try to focus on what your specific needs are. And then what we would be working on with you is part of our partnership leadership series. So that complements the work of the ELS system, but it's really around defining the roles, making sure you can be effective in each of the roles in terms of governance, management, and consultation. So again, that was speed presenting to you. And I don't know if you have time or if you have questions you'd like me to answer.
Anybody have any questions? I do have one, but I can.
I have a couple. And granted, I had questions on the presentation that was put in our packet a week and a half ago, and now being handed this 2 minutes ago is kind of a big change.
Yeah, there's one change, yeah.
So when I was looking up and doing the research on TeamWorks, one of the things I noticed was a lot of large school districts, Anoka Hennepin, South Washington, 834, Stillwater, Matamidi, St. Paul. I did not see a lot of charter schools. And you mentioned that you've been with TeamWorks for 10 plus years. And prior to going to TeamWorks, you worked with Hmong Academy. What does the experience at TeamWorks look like? Because they're not represented on your website with charter schools.
So we're currently working with another charter school in rural Minnesota. I can tell you that right now. We're doing a strategic plan for them. So, and we work with small districts, we work with private schools. We don't work with as many charter school clients as we do with public school districts and individual schools, because there are several of them and they tend to contact us because of the referrals. We operate mostly through referrals. So our charter schools look much more like our work with private schools or with very small school districts. So if I were to differentiate for you, I can tell you that, like, I just left a very small school district in Wisconsin to come here and present to you, where they have one elementary school, one middle school, one high school. And so we work with a range of school districts, a range of clients. We developed a strategic plan, for example, for a nonprofit organization that provides residential services to students who have mental health needs. And so, again, we adapt based on the client's need. I'm familiar with MSA because my son considered going here. He has friends who attend this school, and I live just down the road. So it's really all about focusing on the needs of our education clients rather than trying to say we serve public school districts, or we only serve charter schools, or we only serve private schools. We really just want to serve our education-focused clients.
Well, when I look at funding issues, there are different funding opportunities for a district school and a private school than there are for charters. District schools can go out for bonding
And levies.
or levies and referendums. We cannot as a charter school. Private schools can increase tuition. We don't have that, we can't. So we have different constraints. And I guess that's one of the questions I had was, what kind of experience, what kind of charter school experience are you going to bring to us for the value of $15,000, which isn't a lot when you look at our budget, but it is a lot. I mean, it is a lot when we have had finance conversations in the past meetings. So, and then what is your diversity among your staff like? We are a very diverse student population, and so I'm wondering if that is reflected in your staffing.
It is not as diverse as we would like it to be, and we are working on that. We have an associate consultant that also has actually served as a charter school director himself. And in terms of our diversity, it's really around our experience. I can tell you, having worked in St. Paul Public Schools for several years myself, that diversity is absolutely top of mind. Equity is one of the lenses in our pathways at TeamWorks, so we've been refining our work, and you mentioned some of the districts that we work with. Many of our clients right now are really working with an equity lens, trying to focus on DEI in ways that they haven't in the past and that they struggle with. And so our work, our planning, everything that we do is really around elevating student voice, making sure that we are hearing from the different voices in your community, including the underrepresented voices. So that is actually part of what I believe personally, and has been part of my work since joining St. Paul Public Schools way back in the early 90s. So it is part of what I bring to every client opportunity that I have.
And Mary, we will address the financial aspects of this later on in our discussion point. My question though, and I want to stick to our time as quickly as we can you speak to the longevity of things? This is a one-year process, but how do we ensure that moving forward, we're continuing with this process? Because this is an investment for our school, it's an investment for this board level. But how do I ensure, if I'm not the chair next year, that we're following through things, or we see a complete turnover on the board again?
So there's no guarantee if you all were to leave as board members that everything would carry forward. I would hope that some of you would remain and would be able to take that information forward. The frameworks that we mentioned, the 3-year planning that I noted, those are all intended to be structural elements to help you be able to say, we are going to use these tools and practices, we're going to begin applying them this year, so that then you can continue to use them beyond the life of this school board, for example. So what we do is intended to have legs, and that will depend on the work that we all do together, if I have that opportunity to work with you, to say how can we make that last. And again, it will be learning the tools, applying the tools, spreading them throughout MSA if you decide that you do like these tools. And that's how you can make it last. I noticed that you have a board self-evaluation that you're going to be going through next. Having those kinds of tools in place, reflecting, having the self-evaluation, having monitoring reports between the board and your management team, which I also see is on your agenda later on, your strategic planning. That's all part of making sure that it sticks.
I got a quick question. It might be nice for people to understand. In the governance section, it talks about legislative agenda. Can you speak or offer assurance as to how you all are Minnesota state specific in terms of what you advance in the excellence in governance?
So what I can say is we do have clients in other states. And when we work with our clients, the majority of them, the vast majority of them are in Minnesota. And I know that you, as well as school districts, are still adapting to legislative changes that are coming down the pike. And so when we work with you, we'll be focusing on Minnesota charter school legislation that support you. We'll be focusing on your needs with your authorizer, but also the authorizer statutes here. So when we work with our clients, we make sure that we're in alignment with whatever the state statutes are.
Okay.
Yeah, because in Wisconsin, I can tell you, it is very different in terms of funding, in terms of the contracts, for example, with their teachers. So depending on the client, we need to either zig or zag. And we do everything we can to make sure we understand what their needs are.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Christine, for your time. We will have a discussion on this later on in our regular meeting. But now we're going to switch gears and focus on governance training and the response to our authorizer. In June, we were issued a notice of concern by our authorizer that was shared with everybody to reflect on. It is my role as the chair to be the spokesman for this board, but we need to come up with a decision on how we're going to move forward in ensuring that our board governance stays strong. And so I've asked for everybody to do the self-evaluation and to come to the table prepared to help construct this letter. You've got a copy of each of the notice. You got a copy of the averages issued by all board members. Just collect my slides here. So I've started the construction of this letter, and I want to first start off with the first paragraph here and see if everybody agrees with this. But my letter states, the letter that we're constructing states, upon reviewing your letter, we, the Board of Directors, recognize your concerns of board governance, specifically related to understanding of role, responsibility, as well as legal and ethical requirements. In recent meetings, actions have been taken by the board to address the concerns involving incidents involving Minnesota State Statute, Chapter 13D, and/or Minnesota State Statute 13. However, we recognize the issue goes beyond the matters of sharing non-public information. Are there any questions in regards to that paragraph? In our July orientation meeting, board members were asked to do a self-evaluation of their understanding of fiduciary duties in terms of duty of care, duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. We have concluded that following. So thinking about these three areas, duty of care, duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience, where do we feel we need to focus our attention on when it comes to board development? Specifically, let's start with duty of care. So if we look at, and this is an open discussion, if we look at the scores for duty of care, we're averaging 3.5 and 4.6. Are there any areas in which we would like to address? There's also the comments that people provided as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing some that are averaging in the 2.3 and 2.67
I
under
overlooked
duty
that.
of care as well.
I overlooked that, you're correct.
I think when I looked at these questions, this is not the first board I've served on.
Okay.
In fact, I was on a board development committee that looked at pockets of expertise that people on the board brought, and experiences and where the gaps were. So we actively sought out people, in some cases, who had a real estate background or had experience in real estate or in legal issues or in HR. And that's not something I necessarily saw reflected in these questions. But as I look at the question that says, I faithfully serve on board committees and task forces for which I volunteer or on which I'm assigned to serve, I think as we look at that, maybe we need to do some of the development in ensuring that we have higher education representation on the board, that we have somebody with legal experience or human resources experience or real estate, especially as we look to expand and as we look ahead at those kinds of things. So that was just one thought I had, is that sometimes we don't have people on the board. I know in the past we've had accountants and they faithfully served as the treasurer. And it was wonderful to have him. And now I'm excited that we have, and no offense to you, Wendell, but I know I would not have been volunteering for the treasurer position. But I'm excited to see that we have a math teacher at least who's got that acumen that the accounting will hopefully follow suit with. I guess that's one thing that I could see us maybe looking to flesh out and develop a little bit further is what roles, what experience do we have that we bring to the board?
I'm sorry, we're talking about duty of care?
Yep.
Okay. So duty of care, just so I understand, having more acumen, you feel leads to a higher duty of care or satisfying that requirement? Did I miss the question?
So I think sometimes when you have a more fleshed out board that has experience in different areas, you are able to better go through different things because you have that experience on the board. Does that
So
make sense?
higher education, you feel is a requirement or helps fulfill the duty of care?
I wouldn't say that you have to have a higher ed degree, but someone who has experience working in higher education.
Like college?
Yes.
Okay.
Looking at some of those qualities.
So that's more of a future look. I see where you're coming from, but it's what can we as a current board do to address the duty of care. What I understand, marketing for members with specific backgrounds to ensure the success of the board. Would you agree to that?
And
Currently,
keeping it in mind when we have a vacancy that comes up, is there a gap in what a potential person is bringing to the board?
Are we still talking about duty of care?
yes.
Duty of care is to do no harm, correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. That's why I'm trying
Okay.
to figure out some words here.
I'm just struggling with
Uh,
the conversation here. If the
So
duty
that-
of care is to do no harm, and the question is,
Is there an
One
area of
strategy-
weakness that we need to address? in duty of
Sorry?
care? Is there an area of weakness that we need to address within the duty of care? So if we look at this, the lowest scoring ones was actively engaging and assisting in lobbying for legislation to further the mission of the school. I would say from my experience, I had no idea that that was part of the position. I will honestly admit that.
And I think with that being said, I know when I've brought up ideas of inviting onto campus, especially after we're named the #1 school by niche or by US World and Reports, US News and Report, it has not been received favorably. But I think one thing I have learned in my nonprofit work is that if you have something that's really great, you want to bring people in for them to see and kind of a show and tell, hey, come on in. We want you to come in the doors and see what a charter school looks like and hear some of the struggles.
So would you say that you're addressing that bottom one, I'm engaged in assisting and raising adequate resources for school to carry out its mission?
I would say that it's both in lobbying for legislation
Mhm.
to further the mission of the school and the resources. Is that,
So an area that we can address in duty of care is marketing and ensuring that we are bringing in resources to help carry out our mission.
whether that's advocating with legislators or if that's placing people on the board who have areas of expertise that we have gaps in.
Anybody else have any comments on duty of care? Under duty of care, it was also said board governance, and we scored 4 and a 4.6. Understand my responsibilities in the process to investigate warnings or reports of office thefts, mismanagement, and other sources of legal misconduct was a 4. 4.67, I understand the difference between governance and management. I think it's interesting that we scored ourselves very high on this when this is the one that keeps coming up as far as community input and with our authorizer. And I think that's why pushing for teams, or bringing in TeamWorks is going to be our best solution to understanding what it is, the difference between governance and management. Duty of loyalty, averaging between 3.83 and 4.83. Is there an area specifically, the lowest scoring one? I have read and understand all the board's operational policies.
I found it hard to answer to that one, I'll be honest, because this was assigned to us a month after at least 3 of us are brand-new board members.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a self-evaluation of where we're currently at. So having this information is going to help guide Randy and I in developing what we need to do, especially with TeamWorks or what other avenue we do pursue. So having this discussion right now is very important.
But that may explain the lower score there, is that you have half the board that is brand new. And we may not have gotten through all of the board policies.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely benefit from either a workshop area of just going over exactly what our policies are kind of in plain language. What do they mean? What are we as a board supposed to do with them? I think that would be beneficial for everyone.
This was actually one of my personal comment. It was one of the things I scored myself lowest on. Interestingly, I have read and reread and held side by side policies, model policies, and I think, and I don't know if anybody else shares the same difficulty, but I don't work these policies every day. Like, I don't have students that I care for or I teach. I don't work in the office or the admin. So for me to put them together and really get to that implement, the other circles that TeamWorks had on their diagram, that's where the break is. So I wish I knew them. I wish they rolled off, the tip of my tongue. And sometimes I think that our deficiency here is when we are so reliant on policy to guide us. It's kind of like procedure, when we're so reliant on procedure to guide us, yet we have an insufficiency in that area, it just kind of leaves us with a break. And going back to duty of care, I feel like that's when we harm. That's when we cause harm to students or community members or, staff, our stakeholders.
Any other comments for duty of loyalty? Duty of obedience. It's evident here that there's a lot of things that need to be learned and taught. Like Mary said, we have a number of new board members, and so that process is something that we're going to have to work out throughout your term. Is there anything specific that kind of drew your attention that you really would like to beef up and know more about? I think the lowest scoring that I can see, the Minnesota Pupil Fair dismissal law. We have the annual audit reports to consumer, nonprofit corporation status, filing with the Minnesota Secretary of State. All of this was listed in the packet that Emma gave us for our onboarding. It's just taking the time and reading through, which is a daunting task to most. But I think if we can bring somebody on board like Teamworks that can help us make it more interesting and help us bring it to light, I think we're really going to be set up for success there.
I think the one that surprised me is, and it wasn't the highest, but it certainly wasn't the lowest. It was right in that group that scored 3.67 and above, is the Minnesota open meeting law, and that is something we have struggled with, and even coming into this meeting, we failed. I'll put it out there. The agenda was not online 3 days prior for the public. It hit yesterday morning. And I struggle with that because this isn't the first time, and it's not, and I guess I'm wondering, what are we doing to ensure that it is the last time?
And we're aware of the situation, and Randy and I have looked into it, and we are taking steps and measures to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
So it's just, to me, that one was a frustrating one because it ranked high, but yet it happened again. And I don't know, I know I sent an email, I don't know if any other board members caught it, but I'll be honest, not being on the board up until this last time, I'm kind of sick of sending those emails. Hey, we're out of compliance on open meeting law again.
So a continued study of Minnesota law. So continued study with the continued study of Minnesota law, specifically those scoring low in our review. Is there anything else we'd like to address?
Just got general ideas like in the brainstorming phase for how to go onto the board and feel okay with it. So it's overwhelming as a new member to start with. I think having some kind of like an hour orientation kind of session before. So we've got, what we've been told is you have the training to do in 6 months and that very big packet of the training information. It's a lot. So it's kind of focusing on like, here are the 10 things you need to know for sure before you're on your first board meeting. I think would be helpful. Maybe even before that, almost like a job description, like here's what it takes to be on the board, could be helpful. In one of the documents for like reference materials, they talked about like mentors that some boards have, something like that could be helpful, kind of having someone to go to. So those are some ideas I have, just kind of thinking about the big general idea.
Yeah, and my understanding, so the trainings that we receive from MSBA or even Max, they're big picture items. They're just overview of what the position is. It is our responsibility as a board to continue with onboarding training. And I feel like that's something our board has definitely been lacking is specifically onboarding materials for new members, as you said, Isaac. But we do need to curate and have kind of a schedule of ongoing board development as well as self-assessment. And so that's something that we're addressing in this letter right now, is how do we do that? And I think it starts with Teamworks, I think, personally. And we'll get into that discussion later. we do have the resources that was recommended by our authorizer, which I think are great resources and will definitely help us as we move forward. But right now, I think in a matter of transparency, we have some work to do, and I think that in order to bring the community on board with it, we specifically have to do it with Teamworks. But in terms of things that we need to address at this level before we even get there is what's in the self-evaluation. So that's why we're having this discussion right now is what is it that you'd like to work on personally so that we can manage together?
Well, just a couple of thoughts. So I think this is good. Self-evaluation is good because it shows what we think we know, right? So I think that's good. But that's only like a portion of it because we're now saying what we believe we don't know. So that's good that we're all open about that. We have twos on some of these things. And I scored twos. I scored low on some of these. So I scored myself low on these. So that's good. But then there's this other piece I'm trying to think through. What's the right answer? Because there's the disconnect which you alluded to, which is we scored ourselves highly on the area where the community is critiquing us as a board. So that's like a, what don't we know we don't know. That's the other box, right? What don't we know that the community is telling us, but we have a disconnect there. So how do we get that folded in? And then the third one is the training, because we have done some training as a board, even before some of the folks here have been on the board. We've done training, but yet we continue to stumble as a board, not individual, but as a board. And so how do we make that connection between yet another training program and then 6 months later getting an onslaught of things because we stumbled? I don't want to do that. I've been through that a number of times. I don't have the answer. I'm just throwing it out there to say training is not always just the silver bullet, like once we hire this person, then all of a sudden all the problems go away. So we have to really be intentional about how do we apply it, listen, learn, what have you, not just I did my training. Same with DEI, we talked about that. We did our DEI checklist and now we're done. We move on to bigger and better things. We can't do it that way, right? Those are just editorial comments, but it's for all of us to think about as we move into this next phase. How do we do it right?
And that's kind of why I asked the question, like, what is the long-term picture with Teamworks? How do we ensure that what we do now is going to be passed on? And I think it's like you said, it's setting the next board up for success and moving forward and ensuring.
One thing with Teamworks, if that's the decision, is they do construct a school or a board handbook for us too, which is something that would be our property to pass on to new members from year to year. So there is something that they would create with us, for us.
Depending on how we move forward after our discussion later, I've put in here to better understand and to address these areas of weaknesses we have decided, and then I'll implement what we do. But I'm also going to include that in an effort to ensure that all members come to the table prepared and focused, we as a board have decided to separate our workshops and our regular meetings. So that way we're separating the two. So when we come to our workshops, we're there to focus on the workshop, and when we're here for the meetings, we're here to move forward with the actions that need to be held.
Can I ask you to extend that?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. This is my second meeting. This is the second month in a row that we have had things put in our email box within an hour of the meeting. At 4:19, when that email had come through, I had already shut down my computer. I was getting myself prepared, getting my things together to be at this meeting and leaving the door by 4:30. So that being said, and I understand you didn't get it until late.
Well, the reason I shared it was so you could follow along with her, because I didn't know if you'd be able to see the screen, that's all, because she was just giving her presentation. I thought, hey, it'd be nice for you can look on the screen, because
Right.
it wasn't anything we needed, it was just for her to prepare and share, so that's why I sent it to the board, so you could follow
But that
along
was
with
a
her.
very different presentation than what was put in the board packet originally, and I don't know if it's possible to have those deadlines of, we need this by the Wednesday before the meeting. Otherwise, you're going to present what you put in the packet. And that may not be fair to them, But if I'm presenting something, I certainly know what I'm going to present, typically a week before I present it, especially if it's something. So it's something like this where I'm going out and asking for business from someone, that, I think out of fairness to the board members here, who are making the decisions, I think that needs to stop. We need to be able to get that information in a timely fashion so that we can review it and reflect on it, and then come and bring a decision and a discussion, and then decide. So just my 2 cents, but that's my experience from 2 months, and it's happened twice. And so in order to have board members prepared, I think we need to also put in there that we will make every effort to having information to the board members by the Wednesday or the Friday before the board meeting.
To your point, Mary, I do hear your concern. I will say that the information presented tonight, the only difference was the diagram, and they took out the information specific to people. So the content of what was presented did not change. It was all the same. So I just want to make that apparent, that nothing content-wise was changed. Yes, there was a diagram in there, but I do hear the need to ensure that all materials are available at the proper time. I continue with the letter. To ensure that our board is yielding high results and demonstrating best practices, we will adopt training specifically to onboarding new members, ongoing board development, and self-assessment. With the assistance of Teamworks and Minnesota Charter Board Training and Development, we are committed to elevating the standards of our board's governance. Do we feel that anything else needs to be added to this letter?
I guess I crave some sort of phrase where we take accountability for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The urge to, yes, we need training. We'll decide if Teamworks is the right fit for us. Yes, we have these resources, training and development, but we have to set that governance of ourselves, each other as individuals. I'm not sure how or if we state that, but to me it just, I don't want it's not our intention, I just don't want it to sound like we're just trying to outsource our maybe we just say that we will, continuously self-reflect and hold ourselves, how about we just say we will hold ourselves accountable to the fiduciary duties that are expected of us and exercise reasonable judgment and in the advancement of equity when we come to the table each and every time. That's the job, right? That's what we volunteer for.
I think if I'm free to speak on, I believe the letter came out of frustration, right? So if it was the first time that we had made some, let's say, mistake, I don't think we were reading out a letter. We would have handled it, we did handle it. So I think the letter came out of the fact that it was not the first time, it happened a number of times in a similar vein, if you will, of us and governance. So how do we convince ourselves and the authorizer that we understand? And to Adol's point, that we're taking it seriously, we're not just, now we did the training and we'll move on.
Maybe I need to read. Maybe we should read the authorizer's first paragraph again.
Student Achievement Minnesota has significant concerns regarding Math and Science Academy's board governance. The board repeatedly, through its actions, demonstrates that there is not an understanding of role, responsibility, legal, and ethical requirements as a board or board director.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to what Dan was saying, we received incredible DEI training.
And that was after the first notice of concern, after
Yeah,
the
and
investigation.
we had the lawyer come in and
Lawyer
say
Gardner,
that
yep.
they authorized this request, and shortly thereafter, we did exactly the opposite. of what we were talking to. So I think that's the frustration and why the word repeatedly is mentioned in that.
So am I adding anything else?
Is this just in regards to her June 15th letter, or is this also in regards to the August 14th letter?
Well, it's addressed to the notice of concern. I just included this because it needs, you needed this information.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Based on the June.
Then are we okay with me just kind of going back and editing, make sure that my Ts are crossed, my Is are dotted, and then we can send this out? That being said, we do have 10 more minutes. Do we want to open it up for discussion on Teamworks?
Kind of makes sense because I don't want to preemptively, we say with the assistance of Teamworks, but that's still a matter for us to decide
Yeah,
at
and
this moment.
there's ways that I can revise that too.
And what's our other option besides Teamworks? Do we have one?
Recess until 6:15. What says the board?
I don't know if you want to pose your question kind of at the end.
Okay. So with the remaining time, do we want to open it back up discussion for Teamworks, or do we want to recess until 6:15?
Just keep talking until we can finish earlier.
Yeah, that's my hopes. That's why having the discussion now would be helpful.
It's fresh in everybody's memory too.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'll go back and say, Randy and I reached out to Teamworks because we feel there's a need for a third party to step in and kind of give us the training, not just us, but specifically our community. Because there is this sense of distrust when it comes to duties and obligations within the board. And so if we have this third party to come in and present to us why it is important that we follow the rules the way they are, and I'm not saying that we haven't, but there's these accusations being made. It ensures that the community sees that we're being transparent and that we are making this effort to ensure that we are doing best practice and we are moving forward. Randy, do you want to touch on anything?
Yeah, couple things. One, I like that third plan. It's not just a one and done. You know, she or they would commit to being here each and every workshop for the 22-20 or 23-24 school year and just continue that training tailored to what our needs are as a board. And I think that's really essential, and I think that's really important to have that ongoing through the year. It's not just a one-time. The other thing is, I did hear back from Max, and I don't know if you know Eugene Piccolo is retiring, and they're not sure if they're continuing with board training anymore because of his leaving, because he did all the training. So right now, they're not sure if they're going to continue with board training at all. So that other plan wouldn't be able, but I like the thought, like Wendell brought up, was it's a third party that's coming in with lots of experience in this. And I have worked with Teamworks at a previous position before, and the quality of their work is quite impressive. So I think that really means a lot for us as well.
In our meeting, she said, we're not alone. There are many boards that go through the same issues, and that's why they're there. That's why they have the extensive clientele that they have.
And we were really shocked with the cost. I mean, I was thinking it would be about 3 times that amount. I mean, it's very inexpensive for what we're getting out of it.
I guess one of my questions is, did you reach out to anyone else? I mean, other than Max?
Well, we have the stuff that are the resources that Liz provided for us, which I think are great and can be utilized moving forward. But the issue that we're hearing is transparency, transparency, transparency. And so to ensure that somebody's here saying what needs to be said to us in the community will ensure transparency.
They can say, and we can say, whatever we want here. And I've seen that happen, depending on who's in the audience in this room. The behavior has changed drastically. Part of what I think I'm hearing from the community in their lack of trust is that we don't have a plan in carrying out what is said here and putting that out to the community. And so I guess my question is, when Teamworks comes in and they do the training for us, the board, and policies are put into place or decisions are made, the communication that goes back out to the community and the way changes are implemented needs to be communicated out to the stakeholders in the community. And when that's not done, that leads to a lack of trust. I've seen it in organizations. I've seen it here. And there's a reason there's a position and a career called public relations, because they put out the word out to the community. And they put forward the decisions that are made. Whether it's a police force making decisions on how they're going to govern coming out of an investigation, whether it's a higher education institution coming out because of layoffs, or a corporation coming out because they're going through corporate layoffs. Part of that is that communication out. And I know that we used to have a communications committee, and they went through and found things and looked at things and created communication tools to go out to make sure that there wasn't confusion to the community, and that was done away with a few years ago. I'm not sure that the time to bring it back isn't now, especially as we look forward and look at expansion and so forth. So I'm hesitant to say that this is the be-all, end-all, fix-it-all, because I think there's more that needs to be done.
So just reflecting on what you said, a plan that's, the discrepancy between the board and the community is there, when a plan is established at the board level, it's not being carried out to the community. And it's not being communicated to the community what the plan of execution is. You're
also, I think, listening to our authorizer too. I mean, she's identified our governance concerns, and I think we need to look at that and whether it is training, and I think that's why she brought forth some of the options that she did. And even looking back into the investigation a couple years ago, the majority of that was all board governance. So I really feel we do, as a board, really need to look at that training piece of it. And I think bringing in someone to hit the, this is our visionary group. This is, our board governance is really the group that really controls what's happening in our schools. So I really feel this is essential to our continued success.
Using Teamworks,
Yes.
you feel is the right choice?
All right, well, it is 6 o'clock, so I will motion to recess until 6:15. Sarah, will you read our mission?
I can read our mission and vision. Vision to be innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence for all students that creates well-rounded, lifelong learners and global citizens. Our mission, we provide accelerated and inclusive curricula and instruction in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science. Our
Land acknowledgement.
We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Ochati Shakhowi, the people of the Seven Council Fires, and the Wapakute Band, is within MSA's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Indigenous peoples and their history with this land. MSA works to build relationships with Native American students and families through academic pursuits and historical recognition.
Thank you. All right, is that out of order? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay.
At the July meeting, I asked for the vote for the vice chair to be tabled until the August meeting, and I do not see that it made the agenda.
That'll be in my chair report.
Okay. But that would still, because the motion was made to table it till this meeting, it should still appear on the agenda, I believe. And then a motion could be made to move it to the chair report, but it should have been on this
We can
agenda.
add that.
And I apologize, I did not get a chance to do the research into what happens in the time of a tie.
And that's why I have it in the chair report. Where would you like to see it?
I guess it should go under the discussion and decision. Because that's where the pieces would be.
15J?
Or 15A, so that we could get it taken care of first, even though I know right now it's just a procedural thing.
So motion to amend the agenda to 15A. Voting for vice chair.
And then I would also like to amend it to pull the personnel update, not the people per se who are on there, but I think the update is maybe incomplete. I'm guessing we have some seasonal employees in the way of coaches that should be listed on that report as well. Or do we not have any coaches for cross-country and volleyball and so forth?
There's a new volleyball coach, I believe, one of our teachers, but that was just recent since this came out.
Okay,
Because that came on Wednesday and he talked with Mr. Heyman since then.
okay.
Since then, no.
I had just seen a TBD for one, and
Yeah, everything else is the same.
typically, others show, because coaches typically aren't, like the cross-country coach has a season that they're a coach for, and then their contract is ended.
Correct.
So they should be on the docket every time their season opens up again, even if it's a renewal.
Well, this is just for new hires in here, for anybody new, is the new hires.
Right, but technically, a coach's contract would be a new hire each year,
Okay.
even though because it's a seasonal, we don't carry them through for
Okay.
cross-country through each
I
year.
can bring that to the next meeting.
That would be fine.
So we
Thank
want
you.
a list of 1099 and W-2, anybody that's come back or new. First time or repeat academic year?
Okay.
So we're leaving the current personnel update. We'll have an update for the coaches.
Right, to add this
in the next
1099s.
Thank you.
Mhm.
But I appreciate the fact that we put it in.
Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment of adding 15A, voting for vice chair, and moving everything down a letter? Mary, you gonna make that motion?
I'm sorry, I made the motion to amend it. We need a second to
Yep.
amend it. I
So
can't-
Mary made the motion. Do we have a second?
I can say.
Discussion? Anyone in favor or opposed?
You want in favor?
Discussion on in favor or opposed, sorry.
Discussion on amending it or?
Yep. Sorry, as updating my packet. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And abstain? All right. Motion passes. Get that? Any conflicts of interest? All right. We will continue the recognition of visitors in September. So we'll move on to item 8, the approval of the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes.
I had a few changes. Want to take them at discussion or? want me to-
I have a change as well, so let's take it at discussion, yeah.
So I guess if you want to follow the same, I can propose that we amend it. You want me to talk through the amendments?
Yeah.
Sure, so the first one, Sarah, you and I emailed, but basically the closed meeting statement needs to be actually what was said at the last one, because I think we just got some confusion over an earlier version. So I think for the public sake, we'll update it with the one that was actually read. And that one was kind of vetted by our lawyers, so I feel more comfortable with that, complies with the laws.
Do you have that, Sarah?
Yes.
Yeah, I emailed. I did have, just wanted to make sure we captured kind of everything correctly. And I'm not saying we're trying to not, but a few points were brought up on like the external investigation and the fact that, at least from my standpoint, there was a reference to an investigation that Mr. Vetch did for us, and I was trying to clarify that that was more of a recollection from you, Randy. I don't know that you interviewed anyone or had discussions with folks, at least not with me, and I didn't hear Wendell or Patel or Heather. Also, so I feel that by capturing it as an investigation, it might, be confusing for folks outside if you were to read it in the future. So I was just saying, my advice would be we call that as a recollection or something along those lines. I'm okay because you prepared and presented something in the board packet. But my point was that that was not an investigation, and that's why I would call it for the investigation. And none of that was captured, and I know because it was a painful process, we discussed that for some time. So to not have any of that reflected in the notes just seems like, that's not quite right, right? You don't have to agree with it, but I think our notes need to capture both sides and not just exclusively one side. So my advice would be either to change what that was or add in the points that I shared, which was we have not done an investigation. The motion was to do an investigation. The board chose not to do an investigation. That's my recollection of how we did that 30-minute discussion of how long it was. As painful as it was, that's what happened. So, not what I see in the notes, which was a couple of bullet points in the one and almost nothing from my side that I shared. So my amendment would be updating the closed statement to what was accurate, not accurately, what was actually read, and then a little bit more on the opposing side for the discussion on the external investigation. And if you want that written out explicitly, I can have that. So I guess for the terms of the vote tonight, if you'd be comfortable with me saying I'll put a bullet point or two down that I can email to Sarah, if you guys could allow me to represent my side in the notes.
You're talking about item F?
Let's see.
Page 13, capital letter F. If you're looking at the PDF.
Yep.
Yep, got you in the ring.
Dan, if you're looking for parity or reflection of both sides, then would it be good to just, would it be easier to take it from the transcript?
I'm also fine with that if you want. I mean, it might be lengthy because it was a long discussion, but I'm totally fine with the transcript as well. Whatever. But my point is, here, the only bullet point that came on the opposite side was discussion between the board on the authority to conduct investigation. That was one point, but I came with maybe 5 or 6 about why we need to do this, and that wasn't captured, so it feels like, and it doesn't change the outcome. We decided to not do an investigation on ourselves. That's captured correctly, but the discussion is not. So Heather, I'd be fine with the transcript portion, if that's easier. Sarah can just copy and paste that portion. I don't know, it probably doesn't capture who said what, does it? But at least it'll have the words, right?
It would delineate who said what.
You too?
Yeah. Well, we'd have,
The raw transcript does?
You would have to.
yeah.
We'd still have to look it over again and make sure it's
Mhm.
accurate.
I can do that.
So what are the points again, Dan?
I think I'd have to go back through what the discussion was, but my point tonight is that the one bullet point here doesn't capture the conversation that we had around it. In these notes, I meant to not capture every word, because I also don't want to have 42-page documents, but at least put in the, because we've been asked a number of times, which is why I brought this forward. We chose not to. And here, the reason we chose not to, it says the cost was the reason. I'm not sure why everyone voted the way they did, but that's what's being captured in our notes, was because we didn't want to spend any money, right? The cost is unknown. So the concerns over the financial costs is the reason why we want to investigate. That's what's being captured. I'm not saying that's what we did, but that's what the notes say.
I guess I don't personally feel comfortable, I want to know what's going to be put in. I just, for my peace of mind, what's going to be said, so if you could reiterate what you feel needs to be reflected at this time, if we're going to approve it that way.
Or we could bring it to October, make the changes, bring it to October.
Mhm. Yeah, we could leave that pending approval of F.
Yeah, I'm fine with that
That
too.
just-
Yeah, totally. My concern is just this, we lose track of history so quickly. Within months, we already forget what we did in January or February, and so to not have it captured doesn't feel right to me. So I'm fine, if you want to give me the action item of transcribing, and we can approve it in.
In October's meeting.
I have an easy amendment.
Mm-hmm.
On page 7, under B, Patel has a space in her name, just making that, taking that space out. Easy enough to do.
Yeah, mine is under item B2 in the organizational meeting. It says that Randy would like 15 minutes to review the second opinion, but it was actually a motion that I called and failed. So it should reflect that. And that's on page 3.
What was your original thought?
On page 3, it says that Vetch would like to take 15 minutes to review the second opinion, but I called the motion for 15 minutes and it failed. I should say, it didn't receive a second, so it failed. Yeah. All right, so what is the motion now? It's,
So, are we tabling the item F on the.
So we said the closed meeting statement, and
Yep.
then I will come back in, whatever, September, with, that we can approve to amend. And then Mary had a spelling, that was me. And Linda, you had a motion that was missed. Four things.
So we have motion to put the correct said second closed meeting statement, add the opposing to the external investigation. The current bullet point does not convey the opposing side. This will be transcribed and approved in September. Page 7, item B, remove a space in Heidel's name. And page 3, add that there was a motion to review attorney documents by Sletton, no seconds, and failed.
You okay with that motion, Dan?
Yep.
I'll second.
Yeah, we need a second on the amendment.
Yep, I'll second. Okay. Discussion? Comments for, comments against?
I think it's important that our minutes accurately reflect what happened. I know that I've gone back through, and I brought that up with the strategic plan voting, and you don't remember necessarily what happened. I was at that meeting, I didn't remember it, but when they last 5 hours or longer some nights, you don't always remember things. And so I think it's vital that those minutes be as accurate as possible.
And we want to thank Shawnee, she's doing a great job.
Yes,
Just-
and yes.
Yeah, I think, I had this issue. Dan, you might recall, I actually sent you an email or two asking for more parity in the minutes back when we were doing the equity policies. It's one of those where I feel like we either need to just state the motions and the more factual determinants of our meeting, or else we need to give equitable weight.
Yeah, and I have to be careful too, because I mean, some issues, we may all have the same, which is kind of a failure to do on our board, but we may all have the same mindset, so we don't have the opposing one. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. So I'm not asking for parity in every issue. I'm just saying half an hour shouldn't be reduced to a bullet point. And so that, for that I would agree. And you're right, and I think this issue's been going on for some time. And it's not, I don't think it's intentional. I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's just we can correct it as we go through. And that's what's nice if everyone gets a chance to review the notes, because we're all going to catch something different. If you were in that conversation, you may capture that point easier. When you brought up a motion, you're right. The motion I missed in the notes.
All in favor? Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. All right. Chair report, I had a couple of items I just wanted to talk about real quick. You'll notice that I've moved DEI dashboard from the contents of the agenda to the chair's report. And that's not to ignore it, that's not to take it off the table completely. We still have a lot of work to do when it comes to DEI, and it will be ongoing, and it will always be ongoing. But to have something on the agenda that we don't speak to is doing it more of a disservice than it is to actually do it a service. So I will continue to actively include DEI within my report, as well as Randy's report to ensure that we're continuing this conversation and this ongoing development of DEI. I also had in here a vice chair update. I did look through Robert's rules and I did look up some research, and as it stands, there is a tie. There is no formal way of addressing this tie other than including more board members on the vote. And after tonight, I'm hoping we'll have a full board again and we can really put that vote to good use. So that's where we're at. Student reps will be continued in September when we seat our student reps. So we'll move on to item 11, Executive Director's Report.
All right. Well, there's two pieces. I have my director's report, but also now that the facility committee is a school committee, I'll give an update. Since we didn't discuss the facility update in July, there's we had 2 meetings, one in June and one in July, that the minutes are in here. So actually, yeah, one in July and one in August, I'm sorry. And there's been a lot of changes, so it's interesting how 1 week can change from week to week when things are happening on a constant basis. So a couple things from our last meeting was, we discussed like what do we want the communication, what do we want to communicate to our parents? We went around as a facility committee, we talked about what are those things, we included that in our weekly communication last 2 weeks ago, just a little update, and that kind of came from our committee, and we're just talking about that piece of it, but also updates as a committee as far as what's happening and what's going on. And a lot of that will be in the expansion update. So in the update, a lot of it's the newer items that since last board meeting I want to address are, we did meet with the city. One of the members from NTH and then Kate and myself, we met with the city just to kind of update them that we wanted to start that process of discussing with them the possibility of purchasing the site that we've identified in Woodbury, that's in the 833 school district, and for them to take it off the tax bracket as it's right now zoned industrial. So it was a positive conversation. It was just an initial conversation. One thing he was going to do, they have an in-house meeting in September, and he was going to bring that forward to the members there. It's not for the public yet, but just let them know that we were interested in it. We're a little reluctant to take it off the tax roll because they are getting money from that facility, so that's something that would be a little bit of a hurdle that we'll have to address, but there's some options that we could take. But that was something that happened since our last meeting, so I want to update you on that. We also met last Friday with and our project managers, the architects, and the building company. And they did a partial feasibility study, so right now there's a lot more to it, but there's some concerns with the site that they have. One is you're taking, well, as you know, it's 250,000 square feet. 200,000 is a warehouse. And taking a warehouse and converting it to a school brings a lot of concerns. One is the roof, which we all kind of agree. The other is the structural components of it. All the heating and air conditioning units don't meet code anymore, so those would all need to be replaced. Plus, the requirements of a school compared to a warehouse are much different, so we need much more units. So that cost alone would be quite extensive. Also, having to put, and this is a requirement, we'll have to face anywhere we build or not, is we need a storm shelter. So putting a storm shelter in that warehouse is going to be somewhere around $9 million, which takes a big chunk of our remaining money. So if we end up purchasing this building, we'd have to see what we want to buy it for, but right away, you're going to take between $7 and $9 million just for the storm shelter, and that's not even putting it in classrooms or anything else. So that's some of the concerns. We haven't talked about hiring yet the structural engineer, just because do we want to invest that money if this building does not meet our needs? So that's kind of an update right now on that. So they had some of those concerns, and also the structural pieces of it. Because it is a warehouse, there's a lot of joists and as those of you that toured it, in the warehouse, and trying to put a school in there, they're not sure if it would support it. So they have a lot of, Kraus Anderson, who's the construction company, who has done a lot of projects, has some concerns with that site. So that's one piece. So we're looking at that, but then it was brought up, well, what if we knock down the warehouse and rebuild, well, then you're doing a new build. So we're looking at other options again, kind of just to see where we're at, because I know we talked as a facility committee, we don't need all the bells and whistles. And I know the first time we went around it last fall, you know, we had all those conversations, and it was out of our budget, but it was kind of the, you know, with all the bells and whistles to a point, but also at that time, we didn't know what the funding was going to be for schools, and which, you know, luckily the state increased the funding. So there's been some changes to the amount of bonding. So we're looking at all options again, just to make sure we do what's best. And we'll be meeting again with NTH Cunningham and Cross Anderson a week from this Friday again, just to updates on things. I reached out to Bruce Sorensen from our bonding person, just kind of look at some of these options and what kind of bonding we have available to see what would be best for us. So that's just, and my presentation, this doesn't reflect that because, like I said, things are constantly changing. When I had this all in the board packet on Wednesday, that meeting happened on Friday. So as you can see, just that 3 days, how things change. So I'll try to keep you all up to date as much as I can, and things are happening constantly. So in our facility meeting, we'll be meeting again coming up here. So we'll talk about that again. But just an update on that piece of it. I just want to bring everybody up to speed. So the director's report.
Question?
Yes.
On that, and maybe they'll go through it, but couldn't we use that storm shelter as another thing, a gym or a cafeteria or something that we need anyways?
That was the plan, but there's other structural supports that happen with that because of having it a storm shelter. So it's not just a normal gym. There's a lot more to it. So it adds that much onto, even though they were looking at making it in the gym.
Okay, so even it was already going to be a gym. Like
Yeah, but with all the extra that's needed, it adds that cost to it.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be, because it was a long time ago, but it seems to me, if I recall correctly, what was the price tag of doing like a parking garage area if we stayed here that would also serve as a storm shelter? I mean, wasn't that like 10?
It was a lot more because we would have
Like
to
half the
add.
budget.
Yeah, it took a majority of it because we put a ramp in front of CD. And now we need to do, there's watershed. So there's an add-on, I think, for something you needed to add a shelter. And
Right,
it's
so
a
I mean,
lot
I'm
more.
looking at
Yeah,
that, and when
it's-
you say 9 million, I'm like, okay, that sounds like an awful lot, and that is an awful lot, don't get me wrong, it is an awful lot. But when I go back to that conversation, we're $1 million ahead, you know?
Yeah,
Just
but-
to,
Well, in the situation is if we bond, it's going to be about, with total lease aid, max lease aid is about 33 million. Now, if you purchase a building, let's say it's 15, they're not sure yet what it would be because the roof, we need to negotiate, but if that cuts that money to half, now you're going to take 7 to 9 million for storage, you're not going to get many classrooms built with that remaining amount. So we're going to have a lot of warehouse that we're not going to be able to touch for years and years because we've totally used all of our money. So we're going to get stuck with a huge building with only about maybe 60, 50, maybe 40,000 square feet remodeled for classrooms with 200 sitting empty. So, yeah, so there's a lot into that. So we're still looking into it. That's just an update, so.
Randy, has this committee entertained the idea of replication? As an
Yeah,
alternative
right,
to expansion?
Right, no, yeah, we haven't yet, no. Could be a possibility of replication, like doing another 612 somewhere else, like keeping this
So
612.
this would stay, we just use this model in a different city? or-
The situation we have is we could, but there's no existing sites here except land in 833. Because that was something really important to our community.
Well,
staying in
replication,
833.
replication would be outside of 833.
Oh, okay. And if we did outside, another district, it's a possibility. All right. This won't take too much time. No, that's good.
No,
That's
thank you.
Good idea. So, director's report, just I'll zip through some things. That communication audit, I added the 2 columns that the board asked for last month, so I added those 2 columns. I just want to give you kind of a committee update. I know Justin's really busy right now getting ready for the start of school. If you've ever seen the classroom they're working on, going through all their technology, so I appreciate him and his helpers and all they're doing. But these numbers were as of Wednesday, but as you know, registration closed on Friday the 18th. So there might be some added in here, but just, you know, here's kind of the amount of interested people are for these committees right now, which is great. As you know, we haven't had a lot of membership in some of our committees, but we have somewhere between, 6 and 23 interested parties for the committees. So the week of next week, Wendell and I will be sitting down with the committee chairs and going through some of these people and getting hold of them for the committees. So that's our goal for next week. So then hopefully we can have a meeting in September and bring those people to our board meeting in September for appointment. So just an update on, I was just really happy to see we have, I guess we had about 600 responses, but this is, still better than we have had, so that's great. Talking about that DEI, this is actually one of our board members suggested this a while ago, so I want to share this. This is just from our last spring, our honor roll. I had Joelle, how's that kind of break it down into the different demographics and kind of see how we did on honor roll based on the different races, special services, and the different districts. So just kind of a glimpse, you can see that it's pretty spread, which is nice. So we had a nice results. Yes.
I think that's a great effort. One comment is as I was going through it, some of the groups are maybe a little too small and could be identifying. So we have to be careful.
I did bring that to his attention here.
Yeah. And I talked to some, and it's like, so we don't have names, but I see what you're saying, but yeah.
When you have a small number and you divide it by such a few, you're like, you or is it you? So we got to be careful of that, but I love the effort to see if we have some disconnects, so that makes sense. But maybe you can have that data, and then what's shared publicly is a little bit more growth.
Gotcha. Okay. And then this is something I really want to focus on. This is something we are really working on, is the teaching and learning. This is something that's just kind of a real good glimpse for our board of the initiatives that we are doing as a school. So, of course, looking at our strategic plan, but this is really a success for all students, right? So, this is what we used, or what our professional development plan was last year and now going forward. So you can see how it's transitioning from last year, continuing in more depth for all of our staff members. So really focusing on MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support. So that is our umbrella. We're kind of really working on those 4 essential questions, or what do our students need to be able to do? How will we know if they're able to do it? What do we do if they can't do it? And what do we do if they already know it? So those are the questions that we look at as we plan. So just to kind of give you an idea, here's the different parts of that umbrella of MTSS, which is our teacher development and evaluation, our PLCs, which is professional learning communities, our PBIS, which is positive behavioral intervention supports. Lots of acronyms in education. SST is our student success teams, and then of course special services. And those are our buckets under our MTSS, and you can kind of see the different years. So 22, 23 is where we kind of really launched this out as an admin team, and all of our professional development for the whole year was in this area. So for instance, in our teacher development and evaluation, we developed walkthroughs, we kind of revamped our evaluation program. We included some cultural responsive teaching as a book study. We brought Paula Forbes in for some training. In PLCs, which is our professional learning communities, we have our academic committee, which comprises of 1 staff member from each of the content areas, and they are the lead for that PLC. They all went to training about professional learning communities last summer, and then they led their content area through the year. So What we did last year was we aligned our curriculum to the Minnesota State standards. And they've also talked about that cultural relevant teaching and that alignment, like I mentioned. And then our PBS, we introduced an SEL program, which is a Character Strong, and also Dragonfire. And then our student support teams, how that differs from our PLCs is this is grade level. So what our SST teams do, and there's a lead in that grade level advisory that leads the student success team. And what we did, and we just kind of started last year, is it's a time for when they meet and they look at student data and they determine who are students of need. You know, what kind of interventions do they need? How do we can help support them in their learning? And then, of course, special services, our special ed department, our 504s, and our EL services. And they put like a process in place, student data privacy, case management, collaboration with our gen ed teachers, and that was done during our workshop time. We did some special education training, not just for our special ed teachers, but also for our general education teachers as well. And now this year, we're taking it one step further. Now we're doing another book study. We did the cultural responsive teaching in the brain. This year, we're doing a grading for equity, part of that diversity training. We're also going to continue with what we did before, and then we're adding some restorative practices with circles and chats. We'll be training this year in our PLCs. We've aligned the curriculum this past year. Now we're working on learning targets and getting into standards, getting into formative and summative assessments. So all that's fitting into that process. Our PBS team is going to continue with what they're working on and really working on our advisory now too, which is last year, it was just the end of the day on Friday. Now it's going to be every day for 30 minutes, and they're going to be more purposeful, and there's planning of what's going to happen in that. And so that's in our PBS, and then SST, we're going to get much more into the data. So that's going to even get more in depth as far as when we're looking at students who are struggling, what supports they need and interventions. Plus also with our block scheduling, we'll be able to design some of that around some of those interventions during those classes. Also with that block scheduling, what it's allowed us is consistent prep time for teachers every day. So now our PLCs, last year, were only able, and our SST teams were only able to meet once a month before school. Now it's job embedded, so it's during the school day, which is going to be much more helpful. And the PLC teams are going to meet weekly, and the SST teams will meet bi-month, twice a month. So much more consistent, which is going to be much more collaborative and just a better outcome, more time to work on that. So that's really our focus. And then, of course, our special services, we're going to continue with what they're working on. They're adding in zones of regulation this year and working through more of that. And then they're adding EL into those special services. So really in depth, but that's the stuff we're doing, and just continuing on, and then you can see then the following year where we're going with that. So it all kind of is our roadmap of where we're designing out our professional development, and I'm going to kind of share that with the board. You kind of see what our purpose and how we're aligning that. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Sure.
The MAVI, oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
Go.
The blocks that are in MAV, are those for teachers to implement or admin to implement?
I'm sorry, for the what?
The maroon ones. I
Oh.
think that's just to illustrate 2023, 2024.
Yeah, that's just the year. The years are, yes.
Who does that though? Like who does the restorative chats? And
It's both. Our teachers haven't got, no one's gone through it yet. The admin went to training this summer. The chats are more administrative, where the circles will be more teachers in their classrooms, building community.
okay, and the PLCs are led by teachers
Yes,
in like a subject matter group?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Often with an admin sitting in.
Yep, sometimes the admin will come in and visit, but it's led by that lead teacher from the academic committee.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the, that implementation flow from equity PD to PLCs to PBIS to SSTs, and then of course, special ed, okay.
Any other questions at all?
Mary?
I do. Because I think somewhere I read that all seventh grade teachers will be able to meet at one point, and I'm just pulling that grade level out. What happens if we have, and I'm not, let me use history, because I know that's happened before. What happens if we have a history teacher that teaches sixth grade and ninth grade? How does that work?
Yeah, and unfortunately, they don't do both, they'll do one or the other. So everyone's assigned to one grade level meeting,
Okay.
okay? Because, yeah, it would be, they'd be
I
going
was
to
like,
meetings
how
all
do
day
they-
long, right?
How
So-
do they get a prep time if they're going to
Yeah.
all these other meetings?
Right.
So that
At
was
that point, too, in my experience with it, it would be the chair of the department's responsibility to give them the information or them to reach out to admin or that team specifically. We've also been, and I'm speaking on behalf of the teachers, we've been given documents that show what the conversation has been about and what it is, so it's our responsibility to update ourselves on it too.
I'm just thinking that, so if the seventh graders get together, or the seventh grade teachers get together and we have a teacher who teaches seventh and 10th grade. And that seventh grade teacher isn't able to go and maybe a student gets discussed during that time that they're struggling and, I mean, how does that go back to them? Because their department chair wouldn't necessarily be a part of that conversation as a seventh grade teacher, but maybe not, if we use history again.
And going into those meetings, there's data sheets that they get on the students, so they would get those as well. They just wouldn't be part of that discussion, but they
Okay,
would
that's-
get it from somebody else.
That's what I
Yeah.
wondered is how do we make sure that those teachers who teach multi-levels or multi-grades are still included in those
Right,
discussions?
so they can make comments, they just don't, they may not attend that grade level meeting. So,
Because a parent the 10th grade teacher may have an older sibling and may know something's going on at home that hasn't been shared with the other seventh grade teachers.
Right, true.
I'm just, trying to figure out how that works for you guys.
And then,
Okay.
There's a system in place.
yeah. And then the last thing is give to the max, which just want to give an update, as you know, we were looking at vans. Well, that doesn't really meet with MDE, but there is, what we can, when we talked about this, a finance meeting, is looking at 15 passenger buses, which do meet the criteria. They just can't be school buses. They can be like the white, if you ever seen like white buses, they don't have the stop arm on them and it doesn't say school bus anywhere on them, but they have the chassis that you don't need the special licensure, so it's a special, you can use those for not transporting kids to and from school, but to school, to activities and back. So I did contact Hoagland Transportation that does it. They're trying to find us some. Eagle Ridge Academy did that as well. So, and there's some great deals with some used that are in good shape too. So maybe more cost effective than getting a van as well. So we're looking into that. So just want to give you, it hasn't died out yet. We're still looking. It's just not a lot's in production right now with, the pandemic and so forth with some of that, but they're out there. And I'm getting updates daily and I'm seeing them, but they're like in Texas or there's a bus here and there. So, but anyway, so they're looking into them for us. So.
Do we have to be careful to make sure that we do an RFP for that, so we don't just automatically go with one?
There's
Because of the
only
dollar amount?
It won't be over that threshold, but there's only certain companies that do that. We'll
Okay.
see, yeah. For buses anyway.
I just wanna make sure we're-
Yeah, and I'm working with a regional company, so yeah. But that's it, unless there's any other questions. So, thank you.
Board committees, are there any questions for Patel as far as the governance and policy committee is concerned? You'll notice that we did curate a policy review plan, just to kind of give us as a board an idea of what policies are coming down the tube. And so if you're somebody who really likes to dive deep into them or want to participate in a governance committee, you'll know what's coming up. Or for community members, if they're specifically interested in certain policies, please come to the governance committees and voice those opinions and concerns.
if I may.
It's great to see that.
Yeah,
And
I
one
was
thing-
going to say, I like this. Thank you so much.
And one thing we want to do too is as soon as that policy has been discussed at the governance meeting, we're going to link it to that so you have it like way in advance. So it's not like the Friday prior and you get all these policies. So as soon as we discuss it, the governance, we'll link it into this document so you guys can start reading them ahead of time. So it's not all at once.
It'll still be on the agenda.
Yep.
It'll still follow protocol. Just, it'll be available to you sooner.
Yeah.
Should we, should the board vote on this policy review plan? Yeah,
I don't know if it's-
I only say that because it's a commitment
Mhm.
at the board level for all of us to be willing to do this work every month.
I think that's a great question. My advice from being in Randall's spot for a while is things come up that you don't plan.
Mhm.
So I feel like, so I completely agree with it. I like having a plan of reviewing the policies, but I don't like that kind of handcuff of saying that I have to do 12 policies this month despite the fact that I have 3 other things, you know? So that's the, because I think in the past we've said a few of these can wait. They're not urgent and we keep it down a month and we move on, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I like it for marching orders, if you will, but we need to be agile as well. as
Yeah,
things come up.
it's definitely subject to change, so I don't.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say
Subject to
subject to
change.
change.
But what I can say is as we work into our board goals, and that's coming up, maybe we can tie it into that somehow as a board goal. We plan to move through these policies within this year.
Okay, so I will just say that, the conversion process that I thought we all committed to in September didn't happen. And the deference that had to be offered was because everybody couldn't prepare at the table. So then we were misaligned when the bylaws came up. And what I feel is happening is, yes, our bylaws trump, but when our policies are misaligned with our bylaws or with Robert's rules that we use, it creates frustration. And so maybe I'll just ask, if we're not willing to commit to this, then should we look at repealing policies that are conflicting, that are confusing, that are misaligned, discretionary, of course, so we alleviate that frustration that people feel when they look at a policy and it says, good example, the chair, whether the chair is still the chair when we went through that transition. So our bylaws trump, but it's frustrating when your policy says something different. What do you all think?
I would add on, given what we know right now, there's no reason why we can't commit to it. But I don't know what will happen next month or the following. So I'm okay to commit right now, given what we know, that we want to go through and update our policies. And I agree, I think we had a plan, maybe it was optimistic, but we had a plan to convert over to the more standard policies, which we've been marching through. It's not fair to do that all in 1 month, right? So we're taking the series out, right? This looks like you're biting out chunks that are manageable within a month.
Or maybe it's not to everybody. I guess that's
I would think that the governance committee, with the discretion that they have, could determine, well, this policy is conflicting, let's maybe bring it to the front for light and work on that one. I mean, that would be my understanding of the committee.
So will the board give the governance committee the marching order to bring forth conflicting, confusing, outdated policies that should just be repealed instead of just sitting in conflict? I'm sorry,
I
I
agree
have
with
to
that.
ask.
Yeah.
I have to clarify this. It's just been a looming.
Yeah.
Well, because this plan is numerical, right? There's no sorry, not that there's no thought, but the thought is numerical, 400s, 300s, 500s, right? The series. And what we're saying now is maybe it makes more sense to be more analytical about picking forward the ones that need to be fixed sooner. And then maybe we go back and do their remaining numerical order.
If we're out of compliance, then I think we have to do that.
It's not an okay answer to say, I see that's in December, right? We'll leave it
Yeah.
at that because
Well,
the
I mean, you know-
800s are then, right?
Regardless of what we can have the most outdated, made-up policy that we want, but if that's not what the state of Minnesota requires of a public school like ours, we can't, that's not what we abide by, even though it's policy adopted by a board.
I know a couple of them that you're thinking about are in the 200 series, correct?
Mhm.
And my recommendation to the board would be to hold off on the 200 series as we move through, when we move through with Teamworks, if we move through with Teamworks, because I think they're going to help address a lot of those conflicting policies and maybe help us, advise us to how to fix them. So it's something to take into consideration there.
And for this month, you would just want to leave the ones that are posted in effect.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Because like I said, if we're out of compliance, then they need to be adjusted.
Can,
And I think, to your point, I think it's best that we just keep it as tentative, because like Dan said, we don't want to be cuffed to it. We want to have that flexibility. And I know there's some hesitation with that in terms of fluidity of it and coming and going on things. So maybe we stick to the structure, but as it comes up, we can add and
okay.
move.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Questions?
Not on this, I have a question on the minutes.
Okay, specifically.
Okay, so it's just a point of clarification and understanding. And thank you for the minutes, Patel. These help tremendously to know what the discussion was, maybe a little bit along them. I guess I wonder, as we look and as we had 98 families or 98 responses to the, I want to be on these committees. That's great. But when I get minutes and I see that less than 50% or 50% of the committee, while it's small, was in attendance, but more so, the only people that were on it were the chair and 2 administrators. I wonder if we're really hearing all the voices, and if only 3 people can come, is it worth having a meeting at that time to be able to make sure that we capture everybody's voice?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And you might, actually, I thought Shawnee doing the minutes really captured a really good point that I tried to make last month, which was, I know the governance committee is supposed to span the scope of our governance, but without more robust representation, we can't really tackle those oversight issues. It would just not be, it wouldn't be fair, to use the word fair. So yeah, when you look at these policies, here's how we have to make some policy progress, right? And in the past, I'm not saying this justification is right or wrong, but at training we were taught that policy implementation should be led in a collaborative effort with administration. So if our admin is reviewing these mandatory policies, 501, 502, 504, they're statutory in nature, we don't have a choice, we're converting or implementing required policy from what we had on our on our website, the district model over to the charter model, we're not really exercising too much thought or discretion. We're kind of learning the language is kind of how I see it. And we utilize the expertise of our admin to make sure that we're proceeding with the series correctly. So, and that's why they're brought to the board, to see if the board is comfortable with converting these. I'm looking at 501, 502, 504. If the board is comfortable converting these policies over, given that admin has looked at them and I was the only other person in attendance. That's kind of.
And I guess my other question is if this is a board committee, I guess I'm confused or seeking clarification as to why admin is calling the meeting and not the board chair, or the
Why not
chairperson
me?
of the committee.
Oh, I think I was traveling.
And so those are just things I'm learning, so if you can help me understand, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's on me. I think I was traveling.
Yeah, you were out of state. So
I
Okay,
also
That's fine.
think too, it's important to point out that
because it's on both meetings, so that's why I
Yeah,
was.
so I probably should have asked Dan to call the meeting. Oh, yeah, I know why. Because I think I was traveling and then we needed to make sure that we had admin available. So I think it was just, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's why you
yeah, you were
sent
gone.
out.
But I think it's also important to point out that when it comes to the policy review, we have certain types of policies. There's the discretionary policies that are more influenced by the school itself, but then there's also the state mandated ones, and a lot of the work that we're working on is complying with the mandated ones.
And so, again, here's just a way that we can be more transparent to our parents and our stakeholders. Putting something in as simple as saying the committee reviewed the following mandated policies.
And that was actually a discussion, and probably not in the minutes, but at our last meeting was about the difference between the two. So that could have been reflected in the meeting.
And that's not reflected
Yep.
in the
Oh,
minutes.
I think we dealt with that before last year. I think the top of the policies, we typically leave the notes of the policy in there. And so, when you come across a policy that's mandatory, it'll say schools are required to have this policy posted, or it'll say this is a mandatory policy required to
Yeah.
be.
For example, 407, note charter schools are not required by statute to have a policy addressing these issues. However, provisions of this policy accurately reflect the requirements of state statutes. So
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, where are you seeing policy 407?
it's one on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I was
Yeah.
looking at the minutes,
Yeah.
and that's where I'm not.
But that's part of what we need to work on, is that onboard training and what we look at when we're reviewing policies and the discretion between the different types of policies. And that's something we've addressed at the governance committee that we're finding solutions for.
And that's great for those of us on the board. I'm just looking at ways we can be more transparent to the stakeholders who don't get the board on board.
Yep.
No, I think it's on the policies too, that suggestive language is left.
Yep.
Like the part that says, this policy is required. Don't we leave that when we post it on the website too? So everybody can see that this is a mandatory policy versus
Yeah. So,
a discretionary one.
something we're working on.
Okay.
Any other questions for Heddle? Finance committee?
All right, so I will recap our last finance meeting. We were looking at reviewing the budget from last year. So I'll say this part again a few times, but the revenues and expenditures are preliminary at this point and will not be finalized until the audit in the fall. Based on the report from June 30th, we had a predicted ADM of 543 and the actual was just over that with 543.19. Revenues received at the end of the reporting period were 106.6 of the working budget. Expenditures dispersed at the end of the reporting period are 102.9% of the working budget. So I think those things show that it was a good prediction of the number of students in the school and the budget in total. We did not need to fall on the line of credit for last year. And then just based on the last conversation last week with Dustin Reeves, there was an extra accrual of lease aid of a large amount of around $177,000. So we look like we have ahead of our projection for the budget surplus. And so Dustin is working with MDE on the lease aid to make sure that it was not miscategorized or in a different year. And again, the revenues and expenditures are preliminary at this point and will be finalized in the audit in the fall, but that's what we're looking at right now for the big picture ideas. For a few smaller points, we have an opportunity for a possible technology grant for emergency connectivity funding. So we hope to know more in the next month. And then Randy already talked about last year's Give to the Max. For this year, we are starting to gather interest and gather members, and our first steps would be set goals of how much money to raise and what the money would be used for. For future meetings, they'll be in my classroom in Building A on the second Monday of the week at 4:15. So second Monday of September would be the first meeting for the regular school year.
Did you want to talk about? Or did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm good.
It was discussed at the finance committee meeting that Dustin was very confident that there is enough funding to provide the training for TeamWorks through the surplus that was given. So there is financial resources there for us. Is there a motion to approve the finance committee reports? Oh, sorry.
Can you be sick of me yet? Because I would be, I think. And yes, this is just the detailed person in me, so I apologize as I learn everything. But when I was looking through the register for financials, there are a couple of things, Verizon Wireless being one, but that's 2 months back to back, so that's fine. But there are 2 different Xcel Energy charges, both on the same day for 2 different amounts. And I guess I'm curious as to why we would have Xcel Energy listed twice. I don't recall seeing that, and yes, prior to going on the board, I really did look through these 2. So.
Do you recall others too, Kate?
I think we have separate meters.
Oh,
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Just because the accounts were listed as the same, so I was curious.
So Isaac, do you want to make a motion to approve the finance
Yep, I make a motion to approve the finance meeting minutes
and reports?
and reports.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Oh, do we need to approve the governance committee?
No, just the finance.
No, okay.
Yeah. All right. Consent agenda. I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Oh, give me a second.
You say anything?
Oh, yes, I'll second.
There's no discussion on this one, right? No.
oh, you can ask for this,
Huh?
you can ask for discussion, because it's to be approved, right? But no one pulled anything off, that's right.
Yeah,
you can
so the
still
consent
vote.
agenda is just with the motion, so.
Correct.
Yep. All right, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Mary, was that a vote in favor?
I'm sorry. I approve it, sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to verify.
No, you're fine.
All in favor? Strategic plan update?
All right. Okay, so just want to go through real quick, just highlight some of the stuff that we've done with the strategic plan to address it this past 22-23 school year and some of the plans for this next school year. So I know I only have about 10 minutes, but as you know, the MSA Board of Directors approved the above mission and vision of the strategic plan and the 3 categories which we're working towards the success of all students, the facility infrastructure, and then the operations. So in these areas, I just kind of want to bring up to highlight some of the areas that this past year, some of just that I really want to draw attention to that we've addressed with success for all students. One that our staff did participate in targeted DEI training. That was one of the areas that was brought forward. We had department chairs. A lot of this is going to be kind of a repeat from the teaching and learning that I presented earlier. So a lot of that, especially with teaching and learning, like the PLCs that we had all of our teacher leads attend the training. All of our staff had training with rights of students who receive special education services. We began our implementation of the MTSS program. We've hit some of the goals that you see, like for instance, 95% of, we've 95% of our students graduate. A group of our teachers and administrators developed walkthrough with our academic committee. We conducted 3 different walkthroughs through the year, and we took that data. Let's see, and then we're looking at, for this next year is adding our grading for equity as part of the DEI training. Or one other thing is our PLCs presented that 100%, that they reached our goal of aligning our curriculum to the standards. We've added another conference. We had just fall conferences, and now we have fall and spring conferences this next year, just to add that another layer of communication for our families. We also did meet that we had 3 town hall meetings with our students last year as well. That was something else we accomplished, and I want to bring that up. We've implemented the block schedule. We've provided staff with training. Some of our teachers went to training last spring, and then also we've got the schedule ready to go with students, and like I said, a lot of that was able to provide time for our teachers to meet with PLCs on a more regular basis and also in their SST or student success teams. So we implemented SST meeting times. One of the big undertakings we're going to take this year is conducting a research-based study of our math progression. That's something that will occur this school year as we meet with our academic teams and with our PLC with our math team. The development of our formative and summative assessments is something that we'll be working on towards the spring and into our next year. So a lot of that's kind of what we've done last year and this year, and you can kind of see what our plans are and what we're doing for the next couple of years. So I know Mary wants to meet sometimes. We can go over some of her questions. I know she has a lot of questions. Are there any other questions on some of the stuff that we've addressed? That's with just the success for all students right now?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
It says in June 20, okay, wait a second. So I have the original strategic plan. I have the one that was in the packet. And I have the one that was in what's coming up for our application to renew.
Yeah.
And when I went through, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. How did we go from this many pages to this many to this many? Most of it was formatting.
Mm-hmm.
But one that I saw that was not in the last 2 that came out, so the one that was in the board packet and in the strategic plan to go to Ms. Nguyen, was under June 2023, which was develop a data tracking system as to study why students leave MSA. This system needs to capture data about students who leave MSA and then do not graduate from high school. And as we look at retaining and attracting and retaining students, I was surprised to see that that wasn't in the strategic plan that we got in our packet today. And I guess I'm curious as to why that got pulled out, because I think that will generate some really good data for us. And can clear up some maybe misconceptions as far as why people leave or don't leave.
Okay. And that's something we could add in for our next, we didn't accomplish that this year, we just didn't do it this year, so it's something we can add in.
I mean, I'm okay if we have to say we didn't hit
Yeah.
this,
Right.
but then don't
Right.
delete it.
Okay.
So anyway, that was just one.
Could it possibly get moved to another?
Yeah, it
I'm
can
just
get-
curious.
Yeah, it didn't get moved because I went through and looked. There were two that got deleted, but one I don't think is pertinent anymore, so I could understand why that one got deleted.
I have a question now. Is that all right, Mary?
Yeah.
On the dashboard, where did that end up? Remember we used to have like a strategic plan update dashboard, and I see some of these are referenced as progress is reporting in the dashboard, but I haven't been looking at
Yeah,
that. Have we been?
I haven't done the dashboard, I just have it updated on here, so yeah.
Okay.
But we can start
Well,
doing it
it's
again in our
expected to
director's
report
report.
if we need
Yeah.
it. At one time, we asked for a dashboard to come in monthly just to know that we're making progress. Now, we have a lot of words here. With tasks.
Sure.
But what do you guys think? Would that be helpful?
I think if we have it on there, we should.
And I
be
know
projecting.
Wendell and I talked about continuing the strategic plan on our monthly meetings, so that would be something we could address that through the dashboard.
Yeah. It wasn't to create more work for you, Andy, it was just
No.
to give us more of a synopsis
More.
of how, because I think the point initially was come back with the ones we're struggling with, right? So
Right.
it's not the ones that are going great. Those are
It's the
nice,
ones we're
but
not
it's the ones
happy.
where we need a little bit of help. More money, more guidance, more board influence, right?
Okay. Sounds good. And then for organizational support, we actually addressed it through some of our compensation study, trying to get that more equitable for our staff, and we implemented kind of stage one in that this past year as we presented that. I want to say that was like April to the board. We're working on that onboarding packet for our board, but that's kind of going to change us when we're going to talk about that a little bit with Teamworks. So that may change a little bit. So same thing with this training, with Emma, we've provided some of that, that electronic training packet that came through. Some of the things that, let's see, so that's, we've updated all our HR files to get them in compliance. That was a big project that was done this past year. Student surveys, we conducted those surveys this year. With the satisfaction surveys that went out to parents, staff, and students. And we addressed those as a board, went through that stuff and some of what we use for making our goals. And then for facilities and infrastructure, as you know, we're still looking in that whole expansion thing. A lot of things this past year kind of changed as we went around with some of the obstacles we hit with increasing in bond rates, availability of building sites, and building materials being more expensive. So a lot of that kind of was addressed, had a lot of changes as we went along and ran into little hurdles as along the way. We addressed some of our SEL needs of some of our students. Let's see what else. We've updated our staff handbooks and those types of things to include some of the things that were needed from the investigation. That was something that was addressed the last year, and we're still making changes to that, those handbooks as well. And it is right here, it's like it says, June 2023. Is that one you're talking about?
Nope.
Okay, all right. And then we implemented again the block schedule and some of that stuff, so. So then we're moving forward, so that's some of those pieces, so.
One other comment.
Yes.
So when we set this up here a couple of years ago, we had those three efforts,
Mhm.
right? And in a discussion with our authorizer, she was just asking if we needed to amend, right, and have a governance piece as well added on there. So it's something for us to think about. Maybe it's not for tonight, but as we are looking to refresh or whatever, do we need to add something to really show that this is an area we take seriously, which I think was one of your comments, that we take it to heart, so this could be one of our tools that we could use to.
Yep. Maybe
I'll
in our
include that in
workshop,
our
in our
letter.
workshop discussion, maybe if we do that, which is coming up later. Thank you.
Just a small thing, should we evolve the acronym to accurately reflect LGBTQIA+.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said, should we reflect the evolution of the acronym? It's throughout
It's
the
throughout,
document,
yes.
yeah. LGBTQ+ is what it says now. I think it's more appropriate to include the IA.
And then IA2S plus. No?
Uh-huh, yes. Yeah, that would be my.
Thank you. I'll make those changes throughout.
Mhm.
All right. Any further questions from the strategic plan update? All right. Do we need to recess for 5 minutes before we get into this next section? Okay. I'll motion for a 5-minute recess.
I can say, Mary Beatty.
Okay,
Dan-
y'all want to
Dan
take
seconds
a
it.
break?
Here we go. We'll reconvene at 7:41. Catching his breath. There he is. So if we could reconvene, please. All right, are we good to go, Caitlin?
Yep.
Welcome back, everybody. So we're in the discussion decision component of our meeting. As amended, we're starting with voting for vice chair. As I said in my report, that at this time, there really is no set rule to help break a tie in this instance. And Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, in governance, there isn't a set need for a vice chair at this time, and that the helping decision to separate the vote would be onboarding the other members.
So I can tell you what I know,
Mhm.
which is the statute doesn't require it, us to have, 124, 317 do not require us to have a vice chair. We are required to have a chair, a treasurer. I mean, we need to have a secretary or clerk, but that could be outsourced.
Yeah,
But vice chair is a discretionary position.
and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do a vice chair. I'd like to have a vice chair.
But, let me just put the
Yeah.
but in, but our bylaws say
Yeah.
that we will have a vice chair.
So the question is do we want to re-vote? Or do we know that it'll be in a tie? We can just table it until the rest of the board is seated?
I would also agree, I think it's nice, I like having a vice chair for the clarity, not required, agreed, but every time something comes up, at least in the past, it was nice to know who it fell to, as opposed to sending out an email saying, can somebody please help?
Yeah.
It's just, so it's a nice bit of help. So,
Well,
but the question of whether we do it tonight or we do it later, I think, we will survive for another hour or two.
Mary, what are your thoughts? I mean,
The original motion was to table the vote till
Yep.
tonight, which is why it needed to be put back on the agenda.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
You're presuming that we would all vote the same way.
And up for discussion. I mean, we
Um,
can do the vote
But we
again.
don't know that for sure.
Yep.
So, I mean, I guess at this point, someone could move to table it to September, or we move to do the vote and see where it comes out.
Yeah.
But procedurally, it needed to be on the
Yep.
agenda.
I understand it, thank you for bringing that. So I guess, is there somebody out there who would like to motion to take a vote? Or is there somebody out there who would like to motion to table it?
The motion would have to be to table, because it's already on to vote for tonight.
So do we move forward with a vote, or do we motion to table it? Is where we're at. I will make the motion to table voting for the vice chair to September. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? In favor, against?
I potentially see us as gaining one more board member that would know the two parties moving forward, or the two parties that have expressed an interest in a vice chair position. I don't know anything about the two community members that have come forward and what their knowledge of the two members pursuing the vice chair position is, so I don't know that we would gain 3 votes, as you had mentioned earlier, that we would be at full board capacity at that point.
But we
That's
have
just
an
my
odd number
comment.
at least, all right?
But we would have an odd number.
So are you asking for?
You just asked
candidate
for
statements?
discussion
Yep,
for or
yeah.
against, and
No,
I'm just saying that's
I'm
my
asking,
thoughts.
would you feel more confident if we asked for candidate statements?
Well, I think procedurally, you mean candidate statements of the vice chairs?
Mhm. Any
I think
thoughts?
we submitted those last month. I guess I'm leaning towards abstaining only because it's reference to.
I'm gonna abstain too.
So.
I don't know if I should say that.
That's why I'm
but-
quiet.
Yep.
Sorry, but I mean, it feels like it's about me, maybe about Heddle, so you guys decide what makes sense.
Just vote, and there's a good chance it's a tie, and then we do it again next month.
Yeah, we can do that. But the motion on the table right now is to table it, so.
I don't have a strong preference, but I think
Mhm.
there's a good chance that happens, and then we can just move on from there.
Yep. So we'll see how the vote turns out, and if it turns out that it fails, then we'll move to a vote, and if that's the case, we're back to square one.
Because your motion is to table it?
For now.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Abstained? So we're going to a vote. All right. So the two candidates up for vice chair, Phil Patel and Dan Ellingson. Please do vote. Sarah, secretary, will you collect them? Review the responses.
All right. Do I read them all out as I go?
Yep.
Okay, one for Ellington. One for Patel. One for Patel, so that's 2. And then for Patel, we're at 3. One for Ellington, 2 for Ellington, and another for Ellington. So it is another tie. 3-3.
So we're back to the motion to table this till September.
Second that.
Okay.
Table the matter for September or table voting again until September?
Voting.
Okay.
Further discussion? In favor, against? All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
We should abstain.
Yeah, sorry.
So 1, 2, 3, 4 for in favor, none, or opposed, and abstained,
Oh, abstain.
motion passes. All right. Item B, continued discussion on board training. So the motion, or the item on the table right now is, do we move forward with Teamworks and approve the contract that was presented us tonight? With this would be also a change in our schedule. So the October workshop would be moved to October 14th, which is a Saturday, from 9 to 12.
Hang on a second. According to this, the first one is the board retreat, and the second one is the approval of Teamworks.
Yeah, they go together.
Well, I guess that was going to be my question was, if we don't approve Teamworks, do we still have the board retreat on October 14th, which I think could still be beneficial?
We can have that discussion, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, to see where everybody's at, let's go around the table, give your thoughts on where we're at with Teamworks. Would anybody like to go first, or should I designate?
I can go first. Mine's pretty simple. I'm glad that they have the, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have a charter designated training program. And they are Minnesota state savvy and up to speed, and they will give us training materials and coach us through our issues actively. So those hit my 3 requirements. Because those are all procedural issues that we need to work out collectively.
Isaac, would you?
Yep, I'll go next.
Go next.
I think in general, it seems like a good idea. I really like the idea that they'll be here every meeting, and not just kind of show up when it works for them, I think. And then also they can see what are our needs, and they have like our self-evaluation information, and then kind of like we talked before, there are some things maybe we get wrong when we self-evaluate ourselves, so they can notice things like that. I do agree that like a training is not going to fix anything. I feel like as a teacher, not being involved in the board, about 2 years ago, it seems like there were issues with the board, and they've tried trainings and things like that, and there's still the same issues right now. So there might be other things, but I think Teamworks would do more help than good, and the financial too does seem like a good deal.
We can give Sarah a chance to catch up.
Yeah, no, I'm just happy to see us moving in this direction, so I don't have an alternative, so I'll be happy to support, try and give this a try.
I like the intent. I'm concerned with the level of charter school experience they have, because I think it's minimal based on what's on their website, what she had to state today. I mean, her comment, and I'm guessing that she would be the representative our school would work with, is that she worked with the charter school prior to coming to Teamworks, and she's been with Teamworks 10 plus years. That being said, that's a really long time ago, and a lot has changed within the charter school topography, if you will say. That's part of it. I'm not unfamiliar with Teamworks. I struggle with them on a diversity standpoint because they are not very diverse. And she reiterated, when I asked her about that, she stated it. I was hoping that she would say, oh no, we've just hired, or we have this many more. And that was not the case. But I struggle because I know 833, which is the school district I know and my children attended within elementary schools, and 2 other districts had some issues with the way that they were led.
Can
by
you speak
them.
to that?
There were just some issues. It's been a while ago, but some cost issues and some things that they were encouraged to do. It was under a previous superintendent that's not at 833 anymore. And so I'm concerned with that. I get that Eugene Piccolo is retiring. I guess I would like to know if there's anybody else out there. And I don't know that because I haven't done any research on it to know. But I guess that's my hesitation. I do like the fact that they would be at our meetings, and that's a positive. But it's only a positive if we put into place what they bring forward at those meetings, and we communicate with our stakeholders. So, yeah. I like where we're going with the intent. Don't get me wrong, I like that. I just don't know if Teamworks is the right vessel to use.
Okay. I mean, I've stated, are you ready?
Sure.
I've stated a lot of the positives that I felt were coming when we addressed this. One thing I think we have, at least the table, admit to is we don't know all the right answers, and a lot of the issues that come from what we're seeing, I think, can be worked out and have a system in place that will help guide us move forward, especially when it comes to onboarding, especially when it comes to governance and maintenance. We did reach out to Eugene Piccolo. He's with the retirement, he's unable to provide that training. Their board is further analyzing how to move forward, whether they, I mean, it would be, I think, detrimental to them if they didn't provide training, but I think that they need to sit down and discuss what their next step is. I do see value in what Liz brought forth with the Minnesota Charter School development, but I think that's just one step in how to move forward, and I think it's a one step to help move us forward after we've done this correctly with Teamworks. I do have some clarifying questions, but I'm going to let Sarah speak before we get there.
Kind of reiterating a little bit what other people have said, like, we don't have another option right now. Do we have like a timeline on when we need to figure out training? Probably sooner than later. And I don't know how long it's going to take for us to find a new one and go through all the pros and cons of a next trainer. And we do have this one here, and I mean, they have, I don't know, maybe both sides of good and bad training. Maybe some has been in the past, some has been in the future. Based on what we heard, she seems to have a good grasp on different types of leadership boards, whether that be nonprofits or big schools, small schools. And again, can only help us rather than hurt us to go through more trainings in person when we hear everyone's opinions, rather than just being online and clicking on a screen where no one really knows what you're saying. So I see benefit here.
Does anybody have points of clarification they'd like to address?
I have a question. Have we asked Eugene Piccolo if he has anyone he could recommend in his retirement?
Randy was the one that reached out with them, so.
I reached out to Michael, who's actually taking over, and he didn't offer anything. I can check, but he might have that access to Eugene, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm guessing that Eugene networks with other people and may know someone. I think that might be an option.
So a point of clarification, Mary, you said that there was an issue with Teamworks with a specific task in a former superintendent of another district, correct? Was it the fact that the superintendent didn't implement the task, or the task was too much for the superintendent? I'd like a little more information. If it's what's holding you back from supporting this, I want to know a little bit more.
I would have to go back through my notes, but they were being advised to do certain things that were not necessarily falling within good governance. The superintendent.
Teamworks was advising the superintendent to do tasks that weren't within good governance.
Correct.
I need to know a little more information.
And one thing about the max training, it's a one and done. It's not a continual thing. What they do, it's either a 2-hour training or a 3-hour training, just one time. Just clarification, where Teamworks is a year long, so
If they're able to provide that training.
if they're able to provide.
Right. So I will make a motion to approve the contract with Teamworks.
Second that.
Second. Further discussion?
Just clarification, so it's year-long for the 15,000, so, is that correct?
Yep.
Yep.
So 6 meetings, I think it was, right? Yeah.
I would also like to reiterate that this does not mean we're putting Forbes aside. We will continue to work with DEI. In fact, Christine told us that she has worked personally with Paula on governance issues in the past, and so that's maybe something we can bring to the table after we go through this training. So that, I think that was another positive that needs to be added.
Since you bring it as a separate subject, did we finish our, what we agreed to it with Paul Fox? Okay.
Yeah, we did.
So there's no additional ones?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Any further discussion? In favor or not? All in favor? Aye. 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1. And abstain? Motion passes. Just to confirm, this does include that October 14th board workshop, so we'll have to update the calendar on it. Now that we've had some time to think about it, was there anything we wanted to add to our response to the letter of concern? Like I said before, this is something that we as a board need to work on collaboratively to show our efforts moving forward together.
I do think, maybe think about it, but a sentence, because as I sit here, I see how these little pieces that we relay in this letter help us fulfill our fiduciary duties. Just the duty of care by hiring Teamworks.
So to go back on one of the paragraphs I have here, to better understand and to address these areas of weakness, we have decided, ... I'll include to hire Teamworks to provide a year-long training and mentorship as our board moves to a system of ongoing board development and self-assessment that is thorough and effective. Are we okay with that? Any further discussion? Do we need to make a motion to approve this, or is this? Yeah. Okay. So I motion to approve the response to the authorizer letter of concern.
I'll second it.
Go ahead.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? Favor or not in favor? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. All right. Item 15D, discussion on policy 202 and 203.1. Heddle?
They are discretionary policies that we should repeal at this time. Is that?
So at our governance committee, the discussion was policy 202 and 203 are discretionary policies, and there was some conflict with the bylaws. Is that correct?
It was difficult. Well, it was difficult to, we would essentially have to redraft, make our own. 203.1.
And I stated earlier tonight, possibly tabling any motions on 202 and 203.1 because they are related to board governance. And as we work through our training with Teamworks, I think that we'd have a better vision and a clearer expectation on what to do with these policies because they are discretionary. And if we construct a handbook through Teamworks, there may not be a need for these as policy.
I mean, for example, 202, Section 3, Officer Responsibilities, the chair, I mean, that's delineated in 317. Yes, 317, 124. I think 124 references 317. So if we're going to relay chair responsibilities, we just want to make sure that we try to align our bylaws with the statute. So if we're trying to capture the statute, then we need to just really make sure that what we draft in our 202 is reflective and not conflicting or so those are just the issues with discretionary policy.
One thing that will help me, I'll just say, as I read through this, I see discussion, and it's not meant to be a slight, but I was ready for a discussion about it, but it sounds like you had in your mind a decision you wanted the board to make, so what would be helpful for me is if it's...
No, I don't mean to imply that at all. I do think it needs to be, that's just my,
that's what you're...
yeah,
okay.
take the committee out of it, that's
But
my personal.
That was something that I learned as I went through, was if you're a little bit vague, then people come with different expectations,
Yes.
so we tried to force it to, are we deciding or are we just sitting and discussing?
But I will also add that it was a consensus at the committee level. Did we have a consensus?
There's conversation on how, when you have so many items, so like your policies, your bylaws, and everything on your website is stating the same thing, and you change one thing, but you don't go back and change the rest, that's where we get a lot of issues. And so the question is because it's a discretionary policy, can we remove one of those items that we don't have to go back and update? There was also discussion on
Look at the minutes.
policy versus bylaw. Policy, when somebody, a stakeholder sees a policy that's like, this is the rule, this is the guideline, this is what we follow. But yet if we have a bylaw that states something different, that's where we have this confusion, this frustration, this.
Or different from the statute,
Or different
right?
from the
Policy
statute,
needs
yeah.
to be reflective of the law. Our bylaws are our law. We have state law, we have federal law, so it needs to be reflective.
Great enough for the policy.
The
Something on
committee,
school's website.
okay, so the committee does not advise that the BOD adopt these policies. However, these policies may be presented for training purposes at the board workshop as time permits. Okay, so that's what the committee decided. So the committee did not advise that the policies be repealed at this time. That's just my personal.
Should be okay at Randall's suggestion that we review or revise as we go through training?
Yeah, we can learn from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to remember if there's something else I wanted to add to that. Randy, was there something you could remember or think?
No, I think you captured everything, because some of those policies are also included in other policies,
And that was something specific to training. When you're going through the policies, you'll notice at the bottom that there is reference policies, that they refer to other policies. They're not referring to our policies, they're referring to MSBA's policies. That's the process we're going through, is we're aligning ours with theirs. So that's, when you're reading through this and you notice that at the bottom, it's not a reference to our policy, it's a reference to MSBA's policies.
Yeah. So when people are seeing conflicts, it's.
Does it make sense for, in our bylaws, to have that, kind of those annotations as well? So if there's a policy that impacts a certain piece of the bylaws, that we would notate that, like in the footer of the bylaws, so that, okay.
You can
And the
annotate your
reason I
bylaws.
ask is, as laws change, as bylaws change, we would be able to catch that then, at the time that bylaws were being rewritten. Because bylaws get rewritten often, usually, you know, things change so that bylaws need to be reviewed and adjusted. And so I'm just wondering to, again, make us better so that we don't run into this in 5 years and 10 years. Do we put an annotation in there that, because had policy 203 or 202 been notated in the current bylaws, that, hey, there's a policy that is impacted by this, or that impacts this, we would have caught this ahead of time versus afterwards.
And why would you ever want to make your bylaws subservient to any posted policy or procedure?
I think it's something we can explore as we go through the training. But like, we just wanted, what the governance committee wanted to do was bring our attention to what is a discretionary policy and why we have them. And I think that we understand that, and holding off and going through the training with Teamworks will help solidify this answer. Any other further discussion? All right, decision, the Pledge of Allegiance policy waiver. Every year, this is something that comes up for renewal. There isn't a formal document we sign, it's just a motion we make to waive the Pledge of Allegiance policy. So, I will make a motion to waive policy 503.1, or no, 531, sorry. Policy 531.
One second.
Second. Discussion? Or against?
Typically what I've heard is that this is, I mean, just so that the folks can feel represented, not necessarily something wrong with the Pledge of Allegiance. I think the school has said forcing every student to say the Pledge of Allegiance is really the same. And then the alternative is that there's nothing stopping people from saying the Pledge of Allegiance either. So it's just kind of, it's a weird thing, because I've gone back and forth with this one in my mind over the years. You know, what makes sense, I grew up with it, and I know a lot of the parents out there watching will say we grew up with it, what's wrong with it? And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but it's more of the individual student's choice as to whether they want to do it, and we're giving them permission to choose or not. And not mandating it. That's where I'm kind of at.
Yeah, the requirement to recite.
To say it, yeah.
Making it required at school.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
All in
Opposed?
favor to
Waive.
waive the requirement.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. Decision on the SAM renewal application, Vetch.
Put that in if you had a chance to look it over, just some of the, what Liz is looking for, just the initial that needs to be submitted to our authorizer by September 1, that is board approved. It's just kind of looking at our existing goals and how we did for the first 4 years, because it's a 5-year contract, but our 5th year is this current school year, so it just looks at the last 4 years. So I compiled the information from the past 4 years, but also some other areas like governance and so forth, so you'll see some of that information that we go forward. And then propose goals for the next contract, which will go to SAM, they look it over, then we have a discussion. They can be changed as we go through our actual full renewal application, which is due in the spring to our authorizer, which is much more extensive. This is just 2 pieces of it, so Exhibit F, and then also some how we're doing as far as meeting our current goals.
I have,
And I don't, just real quick, I don't have all the data yet because, those of you wondering, the MCA data is redacted, but it will come out this Friday. So I'll be able to do comparative data with what the comparative schools that we've identified in our goals. So that'll, I'll be able to answer that one on Friday. I don't have it now. And then also our PSAT scores for this year won't, for 23 as normal, won't be till this fall. So anyway, just want to answer that real quick.
on page 2, I believe it was during 2018-19 that we leased Building C. I might be wrong, but I think that's what Lyndon reserves.
2018?
2018-19 was
I
when we
can
leased
double
Building
check
C.
it.
Yeah, just double check that one.
Oh, and then Isaac caught something too, and I just did a copy paste on some of the goals. We take the math and grade, I had grade 10, it's grade 11, I already made that change in science, we do it in 9th grade, not 10th grade. I just copied and pasted it and changed the percentages for those. So anyway, so I fixed those already, so thanks Isaac for that. But, yeah, okay.
And then on page 4,
Leasing, what building was that when you said?
C.
C.
On page 4, just a point of
I
clarification.
took that actually from the previous application.
Oh, okay.
So that's where that one was from that, so.
Okay. On page 4, just a point of clarification, the 4 teachers that are referenced there, one's term expired, one retired, one chose not to be seated, and one was terminated.
Sorry, can you tell me where we're at?
Page 4,
Yeah,
paragraph 2, about 4 lines down.
yeah. Mm.
So the correction you're
It
looking at, Mary,
says
is the
2
2
MSA
MSA boards.
BOD resigned, and it was
Oh, one,
one term expired, one retired.
one resigned, one was terminated, okay.
Yep.
Okay, it's
And one chose not to be
Okay.
resigned. Not, chose not to
Okay,
be
so I'll change it just to
seated.
one resigned, because the other one, their term just went up, okay.
Mhm. And then I just had questions on various different things. Page 11, goal 4. There's no data there, so I don't
Page 11.
know if there should be.
Which one?
Goal 4.
Okay. Yeah, that was done prior to me. I don't think the reason there's no data is because they didn't conduct a survey. It was a survey on evaluating Cecilia Dodge. So it wasn't a satisfaction survey. The survey was for her evaluation during her term. So I could put that in there and just put there wasn't a satisfaction survey. So that's why there's no data. So, and that's why it says under the results. So that's why, but I could add that in there. There's no survey.
So Randy, are you looking for approval of this?
Yes, because this has to get sent to.
Question on page 7, can we?
Yep.
So, if I'm reading this right, the reading proficiency maybe went down across all 3 of our demographics, is that right? So you have white, Asian, black, it looks like they're all, am I reading that correctly, 23?
What page, Dan?
Page 7, it's under goal 4. And it's kind of a compound question, because when I look at the math, it looks like math is kind of up for every demographic that we're tracking. So,
They look at the difference between, yeah, so we did not, yeah.
well, I guess what I'm saying is, it looks like, if I read this correct, in 2022, we had 89% proficiency in one particular group, and we went down to 77. I see also we had an 86 put down to 75. Am I reading that right? But yet in math, we're up 5-6 points, maybe as much as almost 9 or 11 in the last group. So I was just curious, is there anything that we're doing wrong here where, I mean, math is great.
Mhm.
So-
And why did reading go down? And that's something
Yeah,
we'd
why
have to
did
look
reading go down
into.
across the
Yeah.
board?
And that's, we'd have to look at the data from the MCAs to see where that specifically was for the drop. And we've added more students and, those types of things too as we've increased.
Do we have enough, or, I mean, the
Yeah,
staff?
and we don't, and when they get the
Internal.
MCAs, you don't get a lot of data in that area. Unfortunately, you just get though, but that's something we can internally look into, our reading.
I think that if you're concerned about turnover in both areas, it's been pretty equal as far as turnover in reading. and
I guess I'm
turnover
just
in
curious, what can or should we be doing?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
if it's one group, that's quite easy to jump to, okay, let's focus, but now it's across
Yeah.
the board, all of the students are getting worse at reading.
I think with this data, it's the 2022 grade level is different than the 2023 grade. It's a whole new class, and so it's a whole new group of people. So
Right.
it could be
Sure.
the experiences that they have coming into this test, so.
So I have a question. So when I look at this, and this kind of goes back to a conversation we had last year, with our multi-tiered systems of support, and the numbers that you showed, the columns, positive behavioral interventions, just, cruising through those columns, our grading isn't reflective of this, though. Right? Like
No,
for example, math teachers is this reflective, this isn't reflective of your grades, is it? Do you see what I'm trying to?
No, this is just the state's
This
test.
success in the
Yeah.
classroom versus this success on this
To that,
test,
to
what's the
that point,
grade?
Heather, it's like, why are we seeing these large numbers of students on the highest honor roll in the state practically, and they're not meeting the expectations here at the MCA? So there's some discretion that we need to
And-
really look
and
into.
in one practice we did in our PLCs, we aligned our standards to, our curriculum to the state standards. So hopefully that's going to address some of those too, that we're making sure that we're addressing all the standards, which are tested in MCAs.
I think we need to remember too, that MCAs test what that student knows on that
That particular
day,
day.
at that specific time.
But we're going
And-
down, even though we're aligning,
And
we're going down.
I may not do well on standardized tests, and there's a lot of research out there that states that standardized testing is very biased. But yet, when we look at our honor roll, which takes a look at how a student performs throughout a semester, I think this is important data, and I don't think we should get away from it. But I also think that maybe we should take a look and include that data that you brought in, and thank you so much, on the demographics of the honor roll, because that tells a very different story, and it tells how students do, not just at one moment in time, but how they do over the course of a semester.
Yeah, thankfully, our students seem to be successful in the classroom with instruction, so that's so satisfying and important.
Yeah, I do think that these are very important conversations, and a discussion that we will be having in future meetings, because it's part of this board level. But in interest of time and staying on topic, we're here to approve this document. But like I said, we will get to this discussion in future meetings, and I appreciate the conversation. So we are at, motions has to be made yet, right?
I guess I would like to see that data be brought in into this report, if that's possible. And it may not be something that has been done in the past,
The honor roll?
the honor roll data.
Oh, yeah. It's not a requirement, it's not one of our goals, so we wouldn't, but it's something we can always add if we have
I
more
think
goals
it
down the
makes
road.
sense to add it, because it takes a look at the whole student experience.
Why would
And-
we add it if it's not being asked? Like if the authorizer, if it's not, I mean,
I mean, I can share with Liz just for her own sake, so she knows
Yeah.
it, right? But it's not
I
part
think
of
it should
the
be shared
report.
with her, yes, because
Right.
she might look at the data and have a different perspective of it
Mhm.
and bring it
Right.
to us.
Yeah, I would say, I think it should be, if not officially part of this, an addendum or just a share, because I think it gives it a very positive
Yep.
Mhm.
example of what our teachers and our students are.
Mhm.
Who makes the goals? How much, do we control what the goals are, or is Sam pretty much telling us, here are your goals?
It's really us created. You know,
So that's the
We-
world's best workforce.
yeah, and we also met as an admin and looked at some of these goals as well, too. And they have to be in certain areas, too. They want a goal in proficiency, they want a goal in, closing the achievement gap and so on. So there's requirements, and then we kind of work on what that goal will be. That's, it's attainable, it's not something way out of reach either, so it's a smart goal, but, yeah.
And maybe to that point, Isaac, maybe that can be a goal that gets put in, is that, we're the ones that create the goals and present them to her. Maybe we can create a goal around the achievement gap within the honor roll, to show that, looking at the demographics that way,
It's a, yeah.
just a thought.
I did have one clarification. So this is just a draft, right?
Correct.
So we're approving the draft to be sent to Liz for feedback.
Right, and then we work on our renewal contract in the spring for our next
Yeah.
5 years.
That's
This
what
is
I was-
initial, just kind of a glimpse of where we're at, yes.
Because I was like, why do we need to approve something that's only a draft, but it
Yeah.
has to be, and then to go,
Right.
okay.
Okay, so motion to approve draft of SAM renewal application?
Motion by Sarah.
Sorry, motion by me.
Do we have a second? I will second it. Further discussion? In favor or not? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Passes unanimously. All right. Bonding expansion, 15G.
So I kind of put a little presentation together, which some of it's going to change, as we know, because of my previous report. So if you want, I can adapt and bring it back if you want constant time, but I can go through this. It's just kind of setting some of the goals. A lot of this, I know what we brought up at the facility meeting, is developing what is our story, and I think a lot of this could be included in that, which I think is great for our public to know, why are we expanding, right? So, here's some of the goals of why we want to expand. Secure a site that allows MSA to offer an inclusive, sustainable learning program for all students. Secure a site that allows MSA to offer extensive extracurricular activities and clubs and educational programs to ensure that MSA has a financially sustainable future, to hire and retain quality staff, providing a competitive salary and benefit package, to establish a top K-12 charter school in Woodbury, Minnesota, to establish a K-5 elementary STEAM program to meet the needs of our established 612 program. And then some of the benefits. And that's one of the things we've talked about, is we have this site here. What do we do with this site? Now, some of that bonding potential really determines if we're able to sell this. Well, if we sell it, most likely Canada buys, we another charter school. So to find an $8 million building is pretty cheap, but if we convert this, because if we think back to last year, we talked about merging, because we thought it would be great to have a K-12 program and the benefits of it, because it would provide stuff. But is this something, the problem we had with the merger was it wasn't the right fit. So if we develop a K-5 program that maybe offers like a STEAM program, which has the science, the technology, the math, arts. So if we develop our own, this is just, a thought, is, it would be a better fit for our 612 program. You know, it's something that would feed right in. So that's kind of my thought process is to develop this site into a K-5. But now that could change as whatever's going to happen with the additional site and what we do. If we have to have two sites because of the funding, this may have to stay a 6-8. But maybe down the road, if we're able to all move into one building, 6-12, this site could become our own K-5 program. And it would be a smaller, as you'll see, of, you know, benefits of K-5, you know, extremely low leverage, you know, it's would be like 450 students, so about 75 per grade level. So we still have 125 spots we would have for our 6-12, which still allows the other schools in the Woodbury area to send their students here in 6th grade. So we're not taking that away from it. It just allows us to kind of curb that, oh, we got to bring in 200 every year. So we have our own program and our own feeder program that's developed and designed to meet the needs or to what we want of a 6th grade student. So the lease payments from the elementary enrollment can easily carry the existing debt service and will provide excessive revenue for the building company. Another positive, it's a feeder program, like I mentioned, allows all the revenue generated from 6-12 program to support the new facility. We don't have to use any of the money from our bonding for this site. It's all sustainable within the enrollment of the K-5 itself. So that's a positive, and it does put us in a better financial standing. Using this as a facility for K-5, so it does give us more bonding potential too because of that $8 million debt that we would have. What are we going to do with that spot? So that's just some thoughts of the benefits of a 6-12. I shared the expansion budget model, which was provided by Berg and KDV. So if we, you know, with a K-5 and a 6-12 on one site, you can kind of see some of the potential we have in our surpluses once we're fully enrolled at that amount, where we're going to have surpluses of, you know, depending about 3.5 to 4 million a year. So I mean, we are in a really stable financial position. And then the bonding information, which was provided by Bruce, I put in there too. Now, some of this might be subject to change, like we said, because if our expansion plans change a little bit. But this was done prior to, you know, maybe we can't use that site, maybe we still can. So that's kind of that piece of it, and then the timeline is still the same. And actually, Bruce is working on a timeline for the bonding process for us, which will take, if we were to bond in September, it's about, it would probably be completed around December with all those initials in that process, so. Any questions? I just kind of briefly covered it because it could change, but I just want to kind of bring up potential thought process. It's like, hey, instead of just selling this, if we can, why aren't we, since we were so, you know, thought, hey, you know, why would we want to merge? This a K-12 program would be very beneficial. Well, let's look at that as a potential for us to have our own elementary school that does fit our culture and our, you know, a good fit for our curriculum and also a nice entrance into our 6th grade program. So, just a thought. Yes, Dan?
One of the things that came up during the merger, and I'm not familiar, that's why I asked, but I was told it was anticipated to be more difficult to replicate junior and high school than elementary.
True.
Why? Why is that true? I've heard that, but why?
It's much more expensive to have a middle school and high school because it comes into your licensure areas, because now you can only hire when you hire for middle school. Well, middle school's a little up to 6th grade, it's a little bit easier, but 7th, 8th grade, it gets into your licensure areas.
That you hire?
Yeah, it's much more expensive to run a middle school, high school. Plus, you got to do it really well. That's the issues that, as we are seeing, Woodbury Leadership Academy is going through right now, is trying to get their middle school in a good position. And it's harder. And then if you don't have a middle school really developed, why do you want to start a high school? Because you have to make sure your kids going into high school are really set in middle school. So it's harder that way. It's easier to add an elementary school.
The second comment, I get excited about new ideas. So, but the problem with that is then you have 10 ideas, right? And you don't do it. So my concern is, could this be a distraction for us if we are focusing on the junior high school solution, which we've been kind of marching on? And then we now start K through 5. I'm just a little bit, I'm not saying no,
No,
I'm just a little
right,
worried.
yeah.
that
Now,
now
our
we have-
focus is 612. This would be, once that's underway, if we know we have a timeline that we're 612 in one building, let's look in the possibility of doing something with this existing site. But first, we need to, yes, get 612. And if we're going to have a split site for a while, that elementary possibility would be put on the back burner until we know when this current facility is going to be vacant.
So I think that makes sense, that with all, I mean, if you look strategically more, like what do we see over the next few years, not necessarily this year, right? Could we envision a K through 5, I guess is the question, under MSA, and I think you laid out quite nicely some of the benefits, so, yeah, thanks.
To your point, Dan, something that is in this report, though, is the finances that are here, the bonding expectations. What we're being presented tonight is strictly on the fact that we're doing a K-5. So I think we need the model then, if the focus is to be 612, we need that model to be presented as well. Because right now, this model is on the assumption it's K-12.
Yeah, and that shows this, but correct, we
Yeah.
are actually have them working on other scenarios based on what's the bonding for just 612 with a lot of different scenarios, with 600 in the
Yeah.
new school or 800 in the new school, with 600 here. I mean, so that's the next step I'm working on, so I'll be presenting that probably in September as we have other scenarios because of the change of expansion at that time, so, yes.
And to your other point, Dan, the expenses of going the opposite direction and building a high school, you have to think about what is the facilities cost. For an elementary, you can have a great facility with maybe a track and a field and playground, but for high school, you gotta have baseball diamonds, you gotta have all these sports facilities to accommodate to the extracurriculars, and that's what we're experiencing right now. So that's another added cost.
And an elementary student, they stay in the same classroom basically all day, right? They have one teacher, except for maybe a specialist, where they might go to music and they might go to phy ed.
Yeah.
So,
So there are other things that they're taking into
Yeah.
consideration.
so anyway, this kind of changed with our conversation.
There's something edge of it.
I just had a quick question.
Mary had her hand up,
guess-
sorry.
Oops. I guess I was really surprised to see the K-5 and K-12, because as someone who served on the expansion committee, which then became the merger committee, which then became the facilities committee, us doing our own K-5 hadn't been brought up at any point during those areas. And I guess, so I was very surprised and shocked by it, that it would show up here. And my question, one of my questions is, have we done due diligence? There is a STEM K-5, or a STEM primary school already in Woodbury. Its campus is very, very small. I know that we get a lot of our students from Gateway, because they like the rigor, and they've had the rigor through the Gateway program. Have we reached out? Have we explored how many of those parents might come here for a K-5 or a 2-3 experience?
That's-
I look at this and I go, okay, in basically 18 months, because we would have to have them kind of locked in or identified 18 months from now. We're looking to have 250 kids potentially enrolled in a K-5 program so that we can kick off 25, 26. What is our plan to attract those?
And
that
this is
number?
just a thought process. It's probably not going to happen at that early because right now, given the information we found out Friday, we're probably going to have a split site for a few years because of the amount of bonding. It's just a thought, what do we do with this existing building? And before this, our hope was that the site that we were looking at would be, we'd be able to hopefully next year put 9-12 in there and then the following year move 6-8 in there, leaving this vacant. That's probably going to change now with the feasibility study. So it was a thought of, hey, board, what do you think about this process? So.
And then there's the cost of retrofitting these facilities, because as I go out and I look and I'm going, now there's not a second or third grader that's going to be able to do a combination on those lockers, and the toilets are too high, and, you know, if you've ever gone into an elementary school, their toilets sit like 2 inches off the ground. So I look at those things and I'm like, no, there's a lot of retrofitting, and that's going to come at a cost to us to put a
There'll be some
K-5 here.
changes, yeah.
And what's the impact to our neighbors, our neighborhood, the houses here? And those are all pieces of that due diligence that I really think we need to dig further into before, as we look at the potential of doing a K-12. If you've ever driven by Royal Oaks or Red Rock or Valley Crossing, parents tend to drive their elementary students to school. And we already know the backlog of buses and cars that end up out here. I can only anticipate that that would get even more cumbersome for the neighborhood. They wouldn't have the
Maybe
dances
not.
on Friday or
Yeah,
Saturday
yeah.
night.
Maybe, not, but that's hard because we'd only have 450, not 650 students too. So we're losing, we'd have 200 less kids. So, I mean, it's hard to say how many are going to drive, how many are going to bus, but we wouldn't have student drivers either, so there's some
I would
give and take
encourage
in
you to
that.
go have a look-see, as my parents would say.
I've-
Go have a look-see at some of the elementary schools in the neighborhood at those car lines.
Any other questions?
I just had a quick one. You mentioned in the previous section that the city is reluctant to change the land use.
Yeah, it was initially, so they have to have some conversation, which hasn't happened yet.
So
Because they
there's
didn't even
been
know
no
the building
petition
yet,
filed?
yeah.
Okay, so no petition has formally been filed? We don't have a
Nothing, no,
conclusive,
no.
we don't
This
have a
is
no?
just- We just had an initial conversation with them to start that process.
And probably stupid question, but is that, to me, that would seem like the most important thing. So is that required for bonding? To
And
get-
that's dependent, yes, so
Okay.
we would, yeah.
Okay.
That's why we want to have that initial conversation right away with them, so we set that meeting up to get that conversation started with the city. So,
Thank you for that update. Discussion on the listening session. So I sent out a document for the board to review in regards to the listening session. Is there anything we want to change, address? I just kind of curated a schedule based off of what I know people's schedules are, and correct me if I'm wrong. The format of the listening session would be 2 minutes per speaker. They must complete the half sheet prior to speaking and turn it into the facilitator. They must stay on the given topics. Further comments can be shared via email or written on the half sheet. The 4 topics of concern are safety, communication, quality of current facilities, and expansion. 3 of those came from the survey that we did at the end of last year. We are adding expansion as we are in the heat of it. I did attach the listening doc, so if you wanted to review that, if there's any edits that need to be revised there. Our role as a board member is to be actively listening, and we're not there to respond, we're just there to actively listen. Okay. You want to make note that Mary walked out at 8:44. And yes, we can thank them for their time, and then returned at 46. Yeah. So I tentatively put a board schedule up, where the idea is everyone takes about an hour to sit, because I know some of you will be going and meeting with teachers and meeting with the community. So there's that. If you have any questions on that, we can correct that. So Emma is going to be our facilitator. Her job will be to welcome guests. She'll collect the half sheets as the guests approach the microphone or the speaking area. She'll interject if somebody's off topic. She'll monitor the time, and she'll thank guests. Deb Fleischer had volunteered to take notes. She will outline the points of the speaker, and she'll work in collaboration with the facilitator to number responses. So if there is a point of discussion that needs to go back to the community member, we have the capabilities of doing that without disclosing who they are at their time. And then there's just kind of a list for me to do. So, any questions, comments?
Thanks for listening out. Can I just have a little bit later? I'm arriving at 2:16 at the airport.
Okay.
I don't want to miss my slot, so if somebody's willing to take a little bit later. Sure.
How
I'm
are
sorry,
you?
what time is your shift?
You're
Well,
a,
I'm currently at 4:30, which I think I can make as long as the plane's on time.
Yep.
It certainly won't be if I need to be somewhere.
Yeah.
So either Heddle or Karina?
are we gonna have new members, if potential new members to do this, or is this just us?
I mean, I
Those
can
that are
put
seated
in the
here?
new members if they're willing.
Just
I know
add
it's a
them.
lot to jump in.
You could add a third one, you know, so we have at least two.
Yeah, I can put in another rotation.
I'm saying just if you wanted to offer up and if you're interested in.
Yeah.
I can switch with you.
I will
Dave.
reach out to them.
I can
Yeah, that would
switch.
be a little safer for me.
So I'll
So-
take your 4:30 to 5:30.
5:30 to 6:30.
Okay.
Yeah, Heather will switch.
And I'll reach out to new members too and see if they'd be a part of the rotation, if they're appointed. But do we have an understanding of what to look forward to on that evening?
Say a little bit more about actively listen and do not respond. So do we ask follow-up questions, or do we really just nod and listen?
Pretty much just nod and listen.
So we're not really saying much at all.
It's like our open forum here. It's just, it's an opportunity for us to listen to what the community has concerns about. We as a board cannot make action on current items that come up, so it has to be brought to the next meeting if there
So
are
it's not
any
a
things.
conversation, it's
Yeah.
just it's a listening session, like it says. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and then the other, just point of clarification is like as an individual, right, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
So even if you have two, you can't do anything. So it's-
And that's why we brought in somebody to take notes, so that we are actively listening and hearing what they have to say and not having to do what Sarah's doing.
And we said the work, as part of the workshop in September, will be
Yep.
to address what's brought forth.
Yep. So you'll have time to review the comments and we can have a discussion then. Anything else? Great. Appointment of community members. So since our last meeting, we've had 2 community members come forward and present their statements. So I would make a motion to appoint Brian Linsmeyer to the 1-year term, and, sorry, Jules, what's your last name? Kinkle. Jules Kinkle to the 2-year term.
As a point of process clarification, and I know this was stated that it wasn't done with the community member that was seated in April because Dan was not there, but the process was changed between the last one. Will we have a question and answer period of time with these 2 board members so that we get to know them a little bit better as well?
I can't move forward with that. The issue with the last appointment was...
Because the process is not being, when we asked why the process was different, the chair who was not there said he was not at the meeting at that time. But we proceeded to have a lot of questions of the community member in June and again in July, well, in June. And I guess,
But it's also not standard practice to bring them up and interview them.
I don't know, it's the process that was used in June.
I guess from my understanding, it's the discretion of the chair at that time. I guess the statements were given. You can make your vote on that, based on that.
Okay.
So
Can we
I
ask how the community members come back to us? You know, we've been asking for months now, how did we get to
I guess that was a question I had, was how did they hear about the position?
And
Through advertisement,
If we read
through
there.
communications.
um,
That'll be-
Well, I was going to say, I thought I saw it in a statement.
In one letter, it does state that
Brian?
our colleague had invited somebody in to, Brian specifically, to see the school, and it was addressed at that time that we have an open position and they were interested. So the motion is to approve the appointment of Brian for the one-year term and Jules for the 2. Or do we take them individually?
I would say take them separate. We've got them on here 2 different times.
Okay. So, motion to approve Brian Linsmeyer as the one-year term for the community seat. Is there a second?
It's Brian.
Yep.
How are you doing?
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Sorry, I'm pulling up my reference, but yes?
While I don't know Mr. Linsmeyer, I was happy to see that he is a resident of Woodbury. I would love to know more about what attracts him to this position. And I'm concerned that as a board member, he has a prior shared employment experience with 2 of our administrators. That's my discussion. However, I know we need to get a community member on this board so we're in compliance. So I'm really struggling right now with this.
I think what Brian can bring to the table is value as an outside community member who has no ties to the school, even though you do say that they have prior experience with with administrators. I think that they can bring perspective that we're not aware of.
And maybe that perspective could come through in a statement or a short Q&A session.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Passes 5-1. I make the motion to approve Jules for the 2-year term. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? I think that what we got from the statement is that Jules can bring a good, strong perspective of school settings from many different facets of her experiences, and I'm excited to see what that opportunity is for our school.
Holistic student development is really what resonated with me.
like the vast amount of experience that Jules has. I like the higher education piece that she brings. Again, and this was not shared in her letter, but it was shared in a comment she made to me this evening. She is doing an observational stint at MSA, and there's a part of me that wonders if that's a conflict of interest. Because she would have, in essence, a staff perspective versus a community perspective.
Is she
And we
ten-
already have 4 teachers on the board.
Is she 1099 or W-2, Mr.
Nope.
Vetch?
She's not paid at all.
In that sense, community members are welcome to volunteer at school.
Yeah, that's
freely.
why I asked if she was
Yeah.
1099 or W-2.
Yep, no, she's not. It's all volunteer.
Any
Just like
plan?
anybody
Because
else.
if
Yep.
there's that plan, then she would be ineligible when she
Right.
did become
She is
1099 or
not, no,
W-2.
no, she won't be, it's an unpaid.
But is this unpaid in the realm of a student teacher who is also unpaid?
No, it's different. You have to put in so many observations. When you're getting your administrative license, you just have to get to different, to other schools. Some schools have a K-12, some have a, so you have different experiences. So it's part of her administrative licensure process is to observe in other settings.
And how many hours is that, or is she required, will she be here? What is the term?
It's two,
It depends on the site.
Yeah.
And what is it?
There's a total, all administrators have to observe a total of 320 hours. She has done a large number of hours elsewhere, so she'll be doing some hours here. But really, it's in a voluntary capacity. She'll be visiting classrooms, whatever needs to be done. She's not actually an administrator or a teacher or a school teacher when she's there.
To your point, Mary, doesn't that offer an insight to student life and student development throughout the school? I mean, perspective that we'd like to see at the board, right?
Promoting
Don't you see
volunteerism.
that with the 4 teachers already here?
But you, as a parent, have the right to be part of the PTO as a board member. So I'm
Correct.
saying it's offering an insight to our school.
Well, if I may, it's a different insight because she's looking through the lens of administration and teaching, so it's a little bit different too.
Are you good? All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 5 with 1 abstain. All right. Which brings us to the reading of the oath and the seating of our new members. So at the start of the meeting, I gave to them their oath. So if I could have the 3 of you, Lozano, come on up. Come on over. So you had a chance to read through this oath of office, so repeat after me. I swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And this state, and that I will discharge faithfully
and this state, and that I will discharge faithfully
the duties as a member of the Math and Science Academy's Board of Directors,
the duties as a member of the Math and Science Academy Board of Directors
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you very much. Sign that. Thank you. And if you'd like to have a seat at the table, I think we have 3 open chairs for you. If you want to go around and Introduce yourselves.
Isaac, math teacher.
Welcome.
Whoa, I'm gonna do two at once, here we go. Thank you.
It's not good. Well, welcome. Which brings us to item 16, future board items. I'm just kind of curating a list as we look forward to curating the agenda for next month. I am requesting that we move to building A. I need to separate my space as a teacher to my space as a board. And theater will be using my room for rehearsals, so I don't want to kick them out for two days a week. So we will be meeting next month in room 8A.
And for those of us who are not aware, where is 8A, and is it the new 8A or an old 8A? Because I know we've got.
I believe it's the same. So 8A is in building A over here across the parking lot. Once you go in the main doors, go through the Great Hall, so just straight forward, take a right, and it is the science room on the left.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Is that?
Mr. Goodings.
No,
No, not Mr.
No.
Mr. Aggressive.
no.
Isn't it?
Lyric, isn't it?
Lyric.
Or at least it was.
Lyrics.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lyrics.
Lyrics, okay, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Lyrics.
So the art room is on the
I don't
right,
think
the
Yeah,
science room is on the left.
it's right across from the teacher's old classroom.
Could we get signs with
Yeah.
the two?
Yeah.
Is that what Peggy used to be?
Yes. Very good question. The answer is yes.
Thank you. I'm like, okay, take it old school because all of these rooms have changed, but.
Yep, they did take a change this summer. I should have put the calendar date on here, but the next board workshop will be the first of our separated workshops. September 12th will be our board training. We are expecting Liz Wayne to come in and present on roles and responsibility. For the first hour, this is a 2-hour training. The second hour will be to review the listening session that is conducted on the 31st. Annual report review.
Yeah, we have, well, every year we have an annual report that's due to our authorizer on October 1st. So I will be working on that and bringing that to the board.
So that'll be an item for discussion and
Discussion and
decision.
decision, yes.
Yep. As Randy stated earlier, he and I, as well as the chairs of the other committees, will be assigning committee assignments next week. And so we will have that for approval at the next meeting as well. Is there any other items that we need to address? I'm also in the process of creating or curating a monthly, and I know there was one formerly, but we need to revise it, actual items per month, so we kind of have an idea of what to expect in the coming months and to keep us on track and know when our evaluations are for our director as well as our self-evaluations and just keeping us all in compliance. So, is there anything else that we need to consider for September?
And then Jules and Brian, you'll be getting an MSA email account, okay? So our tech person will get a hold of you with that information for you through the login and password.
And I will be in contact with you as far as trainings, what to look for, when they'll be, and onboarding. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks, so. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Mary motions to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Dan seconds. All right. Motion to adjourn at 9:06. All in favor?